Thank you, Dr. Reynolds, and I'm glad you're not running off just yet because there's more.
It's the part I've been waiting for.
So remember, I promised we have 2 awards we have to give out today. It's our Raymond S. Kellis Leadership Awards, and I was thinking, you have managed to kind of go through just about everything that's a tradition here in Peoria Unified, except this.
I hope so.
So this is super exciting, super exciting. We are just moments away from recognizing 2 very special Raymond S. Kellis Leadership Awards. But to share just a little bit more about what it is that makes these awards so special, please direct your attention to the screens.
Over its more than a century of educating students in the West Valley, the Peoria Unified School District has had many wonderful superintendents, but none has had the long-lasting impact and represented the goals and ideas of the district more than Dr. Raymond S. Kellis. He began his career at Peoria High School in 1959, working as a teacher, bus driver, and football coach. After working in other districts in Arizona, Dr. Kellis returned to Peoria in 1975 as assistant superintendent and was appointed superintendent 3 years later. During his 17 years in office, Peoria experienced its most rapid growth, opening 20 new schools and establishing itself as one of the finest districts in the state. That success was a reflection of the leadership, values, and dedication to public education that was modeled by Dr. Kellis every day. Today, 2 decades after he first retired as superintendent, the impact of Dr. Kellis's vision for the district still plays out on our campuses and across the valley and state that he called home. For 20 years, the district has been proud to recognize exemplary leaders in administration, teaching, and support staff with an award named in his honor. The legacy of Dr. Kellis lives on through the hard work and commitment to students demonstrated by these outstanding Peoria employees.
Dr. Kellis was an extraordinary human being, and he is the epitome of what education was all about. That man talked the talk and walked the walk.
He taught me, a couple of things that have carried with me through my whole life and my whole career, and they're very simple things, really. And that is, no matter what decision you make sure it's in the best interest of kids.
He was committed to the ongoing learning of every student in the district. That was his vision.
He never failed to inspire me, to make me want to be a better teacher, a better person, a better parent.
I just felt very privileged to work with him. Seeing a person who understood very clearly this thing called public education again, and that it's what makes our children's lives successful. It's what makes our democracy strong. It's what our future is all about, and he got that.
He encouraged people to give all of their hearts to the children. And I see that around me every day in our teachers and all of our staff. They are dedicated, they're hardworking, and they're selfless. The hours they spend to invest in these children is amazing, and they get that from Dr. Kellis's vision.
Tonight, we are proud to reflect on the profound impact that Dr. Kellis had on the district and look forward to honoring 3 current leaders who will bear that vision into our future.
Hello, I'm Quinn Kellis, one of 8 children of Raymond S. Kellis. On behalf of the Kellis family, I congratulate each of the Pride of Peoria Award recipients and share a big congratulations to the Raymond S. Kellis Leadership Award recipients. Peoria School District is fortunate to have extraordinary support staff, teachers, and administrators. To those of you who are being recognized today, you represent your peers and colleagues who are also the heart and soul of Peoria. As superintendent of the Dysart School District, I know how hard every employee in Peoria has worked during the past year to allow in-person learning. When other districts were shut down, Peoria provided extraordinary learning experiences for students. In my mind, each one of you is a hero for putting students first. Many years ago, when my father was superintendent of Peoria, he faced the biggest challenge of his career. There was a student with a new medical condition that little was known about at the time, and everyone had different opinions about whether or not they should be allowed to come to school. After a lot of soul searching, my dad came to the conclusion that there is only one thing that stays with us in this life. the things we learn. Well, as educators, that's exactly what we do best. He committed to give that student the very best education Peoria could give during the precious time that he had left. I applaud you for your service to the families of Peoria. Again, congratulations to the Pride of Peoria and the Raymond S. Kellis Leadership Award recipients. I wish you the very best new year.
So are you ready?
I'm a little nervous. I'm anxious about this.
Are you ready? I say we do it.
This teacher has served their campus for 15 years in a humble manner, always seeking to ensure students have a positive role model. Facilitating a collaborative environment in their classroom, this teacher creates foundational understanding that their students use throughout their educational career. This award winner recognizes that students yearn for a sense of purpose, belonging, and connectedness, and creates an atmosphere that accommodates that. In the classroom and on the field, he models hard work, perseverance, and dedication. He creates connections with the students that stay with them throughout college and career and invests in the community that surrounds his campus. This person is known for his dependability and his determination to never stop learning or never stop doing what is best for his community. This winner's commitment to the betterment of Peoria Unified began when he was a student, and he has continued throughout his career, which began in one of his former classrooms, as he advocates for his students. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce the 2021 Raymond S. Kellis Leadership and Teaching Award to winner Mr. Michael Guffey. From Heritage Elementary School. Michael, come on up. More hugs. Let him go down the line, Danielle. Come on, we're not. Sheesh.
This was a huge surprise. I'll try to be real quick. I want to thank all my current staff members at Heritage, the teachers I had at Heritage and at Ironwood, everyone that I've worked with, coaching, everyone that I've worked with, science department. This is yours. Thank you.
Congratulations. So it's hard enough when you have like weeks to prepare for a speech, let alone a few minutes. At least you didn't forget the 3 words you're going to use to support. Number 2?
I think we have one more.
Our next recipient will receive the Leadership in Support Staff Award. Quiet leadership has been used to describe this support staff member that has served Peoria Unified for over a decade. This individual has helped to heal and care for thousands of students and staff throughout their career, always doing so with a high level of professionalism and ease. Prior to the pandemic, peers leaned on this employee because of how knowledgeable she is and her willingness to help ensure everyone is set up for success. During the pandemic, she emulated Dr. Kellis in that she was tirelessly dependable, regardless of the personal sacrifice that took place. We all remember the first weeks of the pandemic and the uncertainty that was felt at all levels of our organization, but thanks to her leadership, we were able to navigate the unknown. Her ethics, her leadership ability, organizational skills, and rapport made the impossible task of reopening our schools possible. Her willingness to listen and empathize with staff on their hardest of days made the biggest of difference in the day-to-day lives of hundreds of employees this year. Her commitment to the health of our community is unparalleled, and I know I have relied greatly on her medical expertise as she has led our district nurses through this pandemic. I am honored to present this award to our district's lead nurse, Miss Lisa Alexander, who in the face of a global pandemic What I was going to say is in the face of a global pandemic, Miss Alexander worked tirelessly, hours. Keep going. I'm pausing so you can get more hugs. Worked tirelessly to make sure each and every one of us, and more importantly, our students and families, were safe. Congratulations, Lisa.
Wow, there's a lot of people. Terminator disinfectant made me cry. Can I keep this award? I once cried to Miss Sari, who probably called me with something really professional. And that's how COVID response team was born. I couldn't do this. Like, I did guidelines and this and that, but it was my health team who did all the implementation, and this is for them, really. I just don't know if I didn't have such a good team, this wouldn't have gone so well. So I think they're everything, and they're the ones keeping our schools open and working so hard. So seriously, I share this with them. And my husband, because I always knew there was a pandemic, but I didn't always know I had a family. I didn't see them, and we were all in the same house. So he's done everything for me. So I think that's it. Just thank you.
Call this meeting to order at 6:02 p.m. As always, great to see everybody this evening. Okay, moving on to section 2, public hearing for Peoria Unified Virtual Instructional Time Model. I do need a motion to move into a public hearing.
I move that we move into public hearing.
I will second.
Thank you for that. Ms. Contra, we have a motion by Ms. Underhill and a second by Ms. Hill. Do we need to do a voice vote, or Ms. Murrell, are you good, or voice vote would be better for you for now? Okay. Board members, please cast your votes. Motion passes, 4 yeas and 1 absent. And as an update, Dr. Sorensen will not be present this evening. All right, Dr. Bell, welcome.
Thank you. This is our second public hearing for the instructional time model that ADE is allowing school districts to have this year. House Bill 2862 allows for districts to submit a board-approved plan for virtual instruction should we need to temporarily close a classroom or school to in-person learning. 2 public hearings are required. This increased flexibility allows us to meet instructional time requirements, even though students may be learning virtually. The required components of the plan include a description of our instructional approach, which, if we go virtual, we will continue to use, district-adopted materials, problem-based learning, mastery learning, and of course, teams for class meetings and class lessons. Time is the second required component. Our students will stay on the same schedule, school start and end time, and be able to access each class according to that schedule. And then finally, we have to have procedures in place to track student attendance. The attendance procedures are dictated to some degree by ADE. They give us options to count attendance if students attend a virtual class or meeting or who submit assigned work. Those students can be counted as present. This concludes my presentation for the public hearing for our virtual instructional time model. President Sandoval, I'll return it to you for public input or comment.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bell. Before we get into any board questions or comments, I don't have any green slips tied to this line item. However, if there is any individual this evening that wishes to speak on this particular line item, I'll pause for. You know what? Actually, we don't need a green slip for public comment. Public hearing, sorry. Public hearing, thank you.
Good evening, Governing Board, Superintendent, Administration, and community. After hearing the presentation, it made me think about the experience that we had last year with virtual learning and students and parents sharing the support or missing an opportunity for more support. So I'd like the board to have a study session to consider how we can leverage substitutes to offer some virtual time, to help support our kids during those times as our core staff are meeting our in-person students.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Oh, no, sorry. So this is a public hearing, a little different than call to the public. So, but if you want to comment on this, within this public hearing, you're more than welcome to. On this particular subject, specifically. Yes, ma'am. You have to give us your address and the year you graduated from high school. I'm just kidding. I'm joking.
That shows my age.
I'm joking.
My Botox prevents that. I am really curious as far as the virtual learning goes. Obviously, like, I know this is super uncharted waters, and I totally respect that, and I know everybody's doing the best they can. Obviously, we have a lot of concerns with virtual learning as far as like the production of, like the education and stuff. Our teachers have done, especially at our school, I can't speak for other schools, our teachers have been fantastic. I don't have any qualms with that. I don't have any problems with that. However, virtual learning is clearly ineffective, as we learned in the last couple of years. And as a parent, especially a parent of a third grader and a first grader, my first grader who started kindergarten virtually, like, I have seen the ramifications of virtual learning. I am not here to start any kind of, commotion about it or anything like that. However, I am here to ask that moving forward, like, I understand that for you guys, you think this is a solution, but it's not a solution. Virtual learning, in my opinion, in my experience as a parent of young children, this is not a solution. So moving forward, like, we all know COVID's not going anywhere. It sucks. We can agree on that. We're being strong-armed by the government. You guys are making decisions that you really shouldn't have to be making, and that really sucks for you guys too. I'm sorry. But what are we going to do moving forward? We have to figure something out because virtual learning is ineffective. My children are not getting the education that they are entitled to. They're not getting it, and it has nothing to do with work. My work is flexible. If I need to stay home, I can stay home. That's not my issue. My issue is the ineffectiveness of virtual learning. So what do we do moving forward? It's not going anywhere. So are we doing this every year? We've got the vaccination thing, the mask thing, that's a totally different subject. Whether it works or not, I don't care. What are we doing about my kids' education? That's it.
Thank you for that. Ms. Contra, during the public hearing, I could use my phone to time. Oh, you got it? Okay. All right. Thank you. If no other public comments or questions, then I'll move over to the board for questions and comments. Thank you for those individuals who did have questions and comments around this line item. Appreciate it. Board members, any questions, comments? Ms. Hill?
I guess the only comment I really wanted to make was my assumption is that we would not actually go completely online and shut down the schools unless we were required to by the state. They would literally shut down every single school. I mean, that would be my hope and prayer, that we wouldn't actually, as PUSD, actually shut down, all of our schools. So I'm hoping that that's something that would have to come from a higher authority.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. Ms. Underhill? Questions, comments?
Yeah, I just had a question just to clarify kind of on that line, that this is a plan that works for students that also choose the virtual option. Is that correct? Sorry.
Thank you for that question, Ms. Underhill. This is in case we have an urgent situation. It would be temporary. We would place the kids very temporarily in a virtual setting. The flexibility behind this House bill has to do with instructional minutes and counting student time for required instructional minutes for the entire school year. That's the flexibility that this offers us. So this is I don't want to say solution, but this would be an approach we would take if in fact we have an entire class or a particular area of a building that had the coronavirus and we needed to respond in a temporary situation. We do have our eCampus school. That's a school of choice for K-12. That piece is the option for parents who have requested and have registered their student for full-time virtual learning.
Thank you, Ms. Underhill. Yes?
No, thank you. That clears that up. And also just the clarification that it could be individual schools in that instance rather than the entire district. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bell. Thank you, Ms. Underhill. Ms. Pingarelli?
Oh, well, that was one of my questions. So I guess for eCampus then, do we have, and I know that's it's different a little bit than what we're talking about now. I just wanted to compare the two. For eCampus, is there a number of minutes that a student has to be online?
There is. We build our schedules around national standards in that field of virtual learning. We do have a reporting vehicle for that school. It has its own number, so technically our eCampus school is a school. So we report everything in that environment just as we would as a normal school.
Okay. So this is specifically just for an emergency if we're closing down?
That's correct. It allows us to count instructional minutes. This takes the place of the last year's distance learning plan that expired at the end of June.
Okay. Is this completely asynchronous? There's no synchronous classroom instruction?
We've gone with a asynchronous model for even our eCampus, but all that we are requiring teachers to contact students, offer support, et cetera.
How then can we be certain of the minutes the student is spending in the classroom if everything is asynchronous?
The minutes are done by a student coming on to a Teams meeting with the teacher online, or submitting work. Those are the three criteria. Those match last year's distance learning plan. We do recognize that we have concerns for our virtual learning, so we have gone back to a schedule that allows the teacher to meet with the students in teams for the classes. They don't necessarily stay on virtually for that 90-minute block or 60-minute block, but there is live instruction.
Okay. Could you take me through, like, if you had an English class for high school on campus, and then you have an English class, the same one, eCampus, and then you have the same one if we're using this type of situation, I guess, how many minutes would they be having? You're saying for eCampus and for this, they have potentially a Teams meeting, and then if they turn in assignments or they show up, then that's counted as their minutes and their participation?
That's correct for this temporary plan.
Okay. Well, I mean, for me, and I know I voted for this, I would like to have, even for this, at least a certain number of minutes of instructional time. And I don't know how that, I guess it would be easier if a whole class is shut down. If only a few students are out, that makes it difficult for the instructor that's teaching. I just want to have some rigid outline of how much instruction that they're getting, not that they're just showing up and that they're, they're doing their homework. That's great. I mean, I think I want to step it up a notch from where it was 2 years ago and last year. That's kind of where I'm coming from.
Thank you for that. You will hear later this evening when we do our report some tighter guidelines, if you will, to teach students who are temporarily absent from the classroom. So we have established a little more direction for principals and teachers.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pingarelli. So, Dr. Bell, I know we're going to have further discussions around this a little bit later, and I know we're talking about reviewing the plan and approving the plan, so we can move forward. But what's the ramp time on mobilizing this plan? Because you brought up this plan is there for emergencies, right? And I know we've had some cases, some students who are quarantined and/or others out of that face-to-face environment, for a certain amount of days. What is the ramp time to mobilize this plan?
The plan is not this year. The plan is much more flexible and meets ADE requirement. It's a very simple template that we have filled out online with the notation of the 2 public hearings and then hopefully governing board approval. Once approved, we would be able to count the students' instructional minutes who are home for a short period of time.
Gotcha.
So that would begin immediately.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that. Ms. Pingerelli?
So that means that we are not counting, if a student is home quarantine, we're not counting that
We are
they're-
not able to count those instructional minutes as a part of their long, full-year instructional minutes until governing board approval.
So, go ahead, Ms. Underhill. What?
So just to clarify, this is basically a replacement or an extension of what we had in place last year so that we would be able to count and be reimbursed for instructional minutes and when students in emergency had to be online.
That's
And
correct.
so
That was
is
the
this-
distance learning plan.
So it's a similar, it's just basically extending that situation.
Correct.
And the minimum amount is 50% of remote time. So that 50% of it would be counted at 100% of
That's
the funding
correct.
level. Okay. I just wanted to clarify. So it's not really necessarily anything different. We just need to basically reapprove and extend this for the current year.
Please.
Thank you for that, Ms. Underhill. We are still in public hearing, ma'am. Did you want to say, did you have something to say on this line item? Yes, I did. Okay, please approach the podium. Yep.
I have a high school son at Liberty High School, and he just came back from quarantine today, and he received no instructional minutes. The only contact we had with any of his teachers was his English teacher. She was very helpful on email, gave us her phone number, said study notes, no instructional minutes from any other teachers, no work assigned. I have the email on my phone if you guys are interested in seeing it afterwards from his English teacher. So 0 minutes.
Thank you for that.
President Samuel?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I voted for this, but down at the House, but here, until we tighten things up a little bit, until I know how much time they're going to be taught, that it's pretty consistent, I'm going to vote no tonight on this.
So, Dr. Bell, I mean, to Ms. Pingerelli's point, Representative Pingerelli's point, I mean, I know you mentioned further details coming, at the latter part of this meeting, but in an effort to allow you and team to move forward and even tighten up maybe some of the loose ends that may exist, at 6:20 this evening, that approval is needed to allow you to do that? Or, I mean, are we going to hear more robust details, I guess, later on in this meeting?
No, the plan is fairly simple, Mr. Sandoval. Again, it's a brief template. I understand what Ms. Pingerelli is saying around what does it look like when kids are in that virtual environment. Yeah. That's what we have started to more clearly define and setting new expectations for teachers associated with that parent and student contact. That's not just for this plan. This plan, again, is more about those instructional minutes piece. However, we are looking at those expectations for teachers because we need to continue the teaching and learning process at home when kids even temporarily get sent home for virtual.
And this is that solution?
That's in our COVID presentation this evening.
Yep, got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. Any other questions, comments from the board? Ms. Hill, good? Ms. Underhill? Yes. Ms. Pingerelli, you good?
No, I still stand. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. All right, Dr. Bell, thank you very much. I do need a motion to adjourn this public hearing. What? I think we vote on it in the... So I do need a motion to adjourn this public hearing.
I move that we adjourn.
I will second.
Ms. Contra, we have a motion by Ms. Underhill and a second by Ms. Hill to adjourn the public hearing. Board members, please cast your votes. Motion passes, 4 and 1 absent. 4 yeas and 1 absent. Thank you, board members. All right, moving on to 4.1, convene public hearing pursuant to ARS 15-948 and 15-905 to review revision number 1 to the expenditure budget for fiscal year 2022. I do need a motion to convene this public hearing. I'll move that we convene the expenditure public hearing.
Second.
Ms. Contra, we have a motion by myself, a second by Ms. Underhill. Board members, please cast your votes. Motion passes, 4 yeas, 1 absent. Thank you, board members. Ms. Myers, welcome.
Good evening, President Sandoval, members of the Governing Board, Dr. Reynolds, and community. Thank you for the opportunity to present the district's first expenditure budget revision for fiscal year 2022. The district has previously proposed and adopted the fiscal year 2022 budget in accordance with state statute prior to July 15th, 2021. During the initial budget process, administration did previously share that due to the legislature not having concluded the 2021 legislative session prior to the budget forms being published, that school districts proposed and adopted their fiscal year 2022 expenditure budget on preliminary budget forms. The Arizona Auditor General's office subsequently published the final forms in July, and school districts are now required to have a budget revision for fiscal year 2022 prior to September 15th to incorporate the final forms and legislative budget information in this year's expenditure budget. The required September budget revision is in addition to the normal or regularly occurring December and May budget revisions that the district manages each fiscal year. I have previously shared that the preliminary budget form calculations that Peoria Unified used when we proposed and adopted our expenditure budget did incorporate legislative action that had been enacted to date at the time that the budget was adopted and does apply to the entire fiscal year according to state statute. So what you'll see tonight in the revision is actually what we brought forward previously when we proposed and adopted our budget. We included some of the critical components, which was an increase to the base support level of 1.97% and includes funding for both inflation as well as the increase for the 20 by 2020 teacher salary increase funding that moved out of classroom site fund into M&O. And I've shared this previously with you, as well as the increase to the classroom site fund base level. The previously adopted and revised budgets also include the district's full district additional assistance restoration and funding from the district's 13% maintenance and operations override. The revised budget also includes, as I mentioned, classroom site fund and other legislative appropriated budget line items. And so with that, we have a summary of the changes with budget revision number 1. We do have a $368,090 increase in maintenance and operations funding due to a fiscal year 2021 average daily membership recalculation by the Arizona Department of Education. Our ADM student enrollment is a factor to our budget calculations, and ADE did issue a recalculation, so we've included that in tonight's budget revision. The revised district additional assistance budget that is on the slide is the same as our adopted budget. No change for our district additional assistance, also known as capital funding. And the classroom site fund budget did increase by $175,907 due to, again, that fiscal year 2021 ADM calculation by ADE, as well as interest that we earned last fiscal year. The district's tax rate was also updated in the revised budget to reflect the final primary and secondary tax rates that were recently published by the Office of the Maricopa County School Superintendent. The final fiscal year 2022 budget forms also include the newly approved weighted additional amount for gifted students. The new category has a weight of 0.0007 per student. Tonight's budget revision does not fully reflect the updated student count for the gifted category due to Arizona Department of Education still pending publishing those updated gifted student counts. And so we do plan to bring forward the effect of that new legislation in our December budget revision. The previously adopted expenditure budget also includes non-levy cash-controlled funds. And as we shared previously, we do have an example of 5 of those cash-controlled budgets on this slide, as well as $60.8 million for federal and state grant funding, which includes $23 million for ESSER-related reimbursement grants. There is no change to these cash-controlled funds in the budget revision, and they remain the same as they were with the adopted budget earlier this summer. Administration has previously shared that Peoria Unified did receive $4.2 million of ESSER 1 funding from the state as a pass-through from the federal government, and that we did expend those dollars in fiscal years 2020 and 2021. And so accordingly, as was the case with our adopted budget and with this revision, there are no dollars funded or budgeted rather for ESSER 1 in the fiscal year 2022 budget. Peoria Unified also received $17.4 million of ESSER 2 reimbursement grant funding for fiscal year 2021 for eligible expenses through September 30th, 2023. And that eligibility period, as I've shared before, actually started in March 2020. $8 million of the ESSER 2 grant funding is included in tonight's revision and was also the same dollar amount, $8 million, was included in our adopted budget earlier this summer. So there's no change with ESSER 2. And then finally, ESSER 3, the American Rescue Plan was enacted in March of this year, and associated ESSER 3 funding amounts were made available to school districts in Arizona based on their Title 1A calculation and associated eligibility. Administration has previously shared that the ESSER 3 funding is a multi-year reimbursement. Again, eligibility back to March of 2020, expiring in September of 2024, and the district's allocation is $39.4 million. ESSER 3 does have new requirements that must be met as a condition of receiving the funding through the American Rescue Plan Act, which has additional new expenditure criteria, a new 20% set-aside requirement, and required stakeholder input. The fiscal year 2022 adopted budget included $15 million of ESSER 3 funding, and that amount remains unchanged in tonight's budget revision. The district has aligned a significant portion of the ESSER 3 grant opportunity to the district's strategic plan, and the associated plan document is currently published on the district's website for all of our community to view. Administration will recommend later this evening that the governing board approve the fiscal year 2022 expenditure budget revision as presented. And with that, this does conclude the presentation at this time. I am available to answer your questions, and being a public hearing, we're also available to receive comments and input. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Myers. I don't have any green slips tied to this line item. However, one isn't required to speak on this line item in the public hearing setting. If any member of the public wishes to speak on this item, I'll pause. Okay. Board members, questions, comments? Ms. Hill, you good? Yeah. All right. Ms. Underhill? Yeah. Representative Pingarelli? All right. I'm good as well. Ms. Myers, thank you very much. Do you need a motion to adjourn this public hearing?
I move that we adjourn the public hearing.
I'll second.
Ms. Contra, I have a motion by Ms. Hill and a second by Representative Pingarelli. Board members, please cast your votes. Motion passes, 4 yeas, 1 absent. Thank you, board members. All right, moving on to our opening exercises. Ms. Hill, would you mind leading us in the pledge? I do ask during our moment of silence that we have lost a few members of our Peoria Unified family, and I would wish for everyone to please keep them in your hearts as we exercise a moment of silence. Thank you.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. Okay, moving on to 7.1, address the agenda, recommend changes, and consider approval of consent agenda. Board members, are there any items or any changes that, any items you'd like to? I do believe we have, I thought we had a public comment on one of the consent items. Is that right? Okay. Ms. Contra, I would like to pull 10.7, which is the Arizona State University AmeriCorps Survivor Link Memorandum of Understanding with Peoria Unified School District, due to there being a public comment tied to this line item. I do need a second for that.
I'll second.
Thank you. So with that said, I do need a motion to approve the agenda, including the consent agenda minus 10.7.
I move that we approve the consent agenda minus agenda item 10.7.
I'll second that. Ms. Contra, we have a motion by Ms. Underhill and a second by myself. Board members, please cast your votes. This past week, there's a group that we have as a district. I mean, we have a lot of individuals throughout the district that volunteer their time and support what we do as an organization in an effort to ensure that all of our students, are put in a position to be successful. And this past week, I do want to recognize the PTSO at Park Ridge Elementary. They had a really great event, luau, that kind of kicked off the year, and it was really neat just to see the students interact and just really, really all the smiles that were had. So I know we have a member here of the PTSO. I don't know if there's anybody else, or is it? Yeah. Gotcha. But thank you. Yeah, thank you for all that you do what you do, as parents, to volunteer your time, again, to just really enhance what we do as a district, and again, inspire our kids, and just make us, just what you do to really align with our just cause as a district is really appreciated. So thank you for that. Okay, moving along to Superintendent Comments. Dr. Reynolds.
Thank you, President Sandoval, Governing Board, Cabinet, and guests. My first comment this evening, I'd like to congratulate Linda Rudd, Peoria Unified's Transition Services Coordinator, who is a school-based Arizona Secondary Transition Services Award recipient. It's a lot. This award is in recognition of Linda's outstanding service and her contribution to exemplary transition-related services for students with disabilities. So congratulations to Mrs. Rudd. I'd also like to congratulate Peoria High School teacher Jared Bicolis, who was recognized at the 2021 Arizona Agriculture Teachers Association Conference for earning the Outstanding Early Career Teacher Award, which is pretty cool. And likewise, a Peoria High School agricultural teacher, James Kaltenbach, was recognized for the second year in a row as the Arizona Agriculture Teacher Association Outstanding Mentor Teacher. So kudos to both of those Peoria High School teachers for their achievements. Last week, I had the pleasure of attending the Peoria City Council meeting where our mayor, Kathy Carlett, recognized Liberty High School's Maddie Frick, Division I singles golf champion, as well as the Liberty High School 6A state championship baseball team during a city council meeting, which was a really neat thing for the students to be able to experience. Mayor Carlett issued a proclamation that August 17th, 2021 was Peoria Liberty Lions State Baseball Championship Day and Peoria Liberty Lions Maddie Frick State Golf Champion Day. Congratulations once again to the team and Maddie for their big wins. Last but not least, Raymond S. Kellis High School and Sunrise Mountain High School just renewed their status as a National Banner Unified Champion School. To receive this designation from Special Olympics, the schools must demonstrate their ongoing commitment on the pathway towards the inclusion revolution through unified programming, such as our Unified Sports Program. Inclusive youth leadership, whole school engagement are part of that as well. We are especially proud of our unified programs and all the work that those schools do, the students who are involved in that. The time, energy, and effort that they put in is just extraordinary, and we're really excited for that announcement. So that concludes my comments.
Very good. A lot of great stuff. Thank you, Dr. Reynolds. All right, moving on to Section 9, public comment, request to address the governing board regarding matters not included on the agenda. The public rules of conduct, the board president shall keep control of the meeting and require the speakers and the audience to refrain from abusive or profane remarks, disruptive outbursts, applause, protests, or other conduct which disrupts or interferes with orderly conduct of the business of the meeting. Personal attacks on board members, staff, or members of the public are not allowed. It is inappropriate to utilize a public hearing, the public comment segment, or any other agenda items for the purpose of making political speeches. Engaging in such conduct and failing to cease such conduct upon request of the presiding officer will be grounds for ending a speaker's time at the podium or for the removal of any disruptive person from the meeting room at the direction of the board president. We will spend 30 minutes on public comment, 3 minutes per individual, and the district, Dr. Reynolds and team will absolutely respond to those individuals who have spoken with any of your questions and or concerns. We do have a lot of public comments, so what we typically do is, oops, let's throw that one back up top. We'll shuffle them and pick them randomly. So here we go. This first public comment comes from Miss Melissa Ewing. Okay. Olivia, do you have a green slip filled out? Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, don't mind.
Good evening, school board members and guests. I'm Olivia Frey. I'm an 8th grader at R. Murphy Elementary, and I believe math should be required in schools. When I got to my first math class this year, I felt anxious and unsafe. There were 32 kids in that classroom, and maybe 7 of them were wearing masks, and no one was social distancing either. I sat next to 2 kids 2 feet away, both unmasked, and no one cared. I was worried for myself, but even more for my little sister. She's only 9, and children under 12 are too young to be vaccinated. If my sister gets COVID, she will be exposing her friends and their families too. The CDC, the WHO, and the AAP all recommend masking in schools. Some people think that masks don't work. However, the University of Alabama found that masking can reduce exposure risk by 68%. A study of schools in North Carolina found that when proper masking was used, less than 1% of the people quarantined caught COVID. The Maricopa County COVID dashboard reports that the Peoria Unified School District has a high transmission rate. In the last week, we had 357 cases per 100,000. During the 3rd week of school, our district had 209 cases, higher than any week last year. By not requiring masks, our district is becoming a dumpster fire for COVID cases. I want to stay in school. I want to keep learning. I would rather be in a classroom where I can ask my teachers questions and get help. But we need to work together to slow the spread of the Delta variant. If we don't do our part to wear masks now, we may have even more COVID variants in the future. The U.S. Secretary of Education said that the school board has the power to implement safety restrictions. I ask you to hold an emergency school board meeting to vote on a mask mandate. We are failing to stop the spread of COVID. Even worse, no one is trying anymore. Be brave. I'm willing to wear a mask to protect my community. Will you do the same?
Thank you, Ms. Frey. Next public comment comes from Ms. Kara Alcantar Dowdy. Is that correct? Heather Wright. Let me find her green slip here. Okay.
Good evening, President Sandoval, Madam Clerk Underhill, board members, and Dr. Reynolds. At the last regular board meeting on August 12th, the first public comment speaker accused Dr. Reynolds of withholding information at a December 2020 board meeting about a new high school course that was being proposed. This speaker held a piece of paper in the air, waved it around, presenting it as a secret October email. It only took me 10 minutes of investigation to find out that this accusation was completely false. Here is a printout of the attachments sent to Dr. Reynolds and others on October 30th, 2020 via email. The attachments are the course proposal. Evidence clearly shows that the public speaker is completely wrong in her accusations. I read through these attachments, and then I watched the December 10th board meeting. At the 1 hour and 44-minute mark of that board meeting, you will hear the Chief Academic Services Officer reading verbatim the course description from this secret email. Secondly, at the 2 hour and 13-minute mark, the 2 hour 15-minute, and the 2 hour and 16-minute marks, you will hear a board member read verbatim sentence number 4 of the course description, the last sentence of the course description, and bullet points 2, 3, and 4 from the participant's will portion of the course proposal. The rest of this secret document is a short sample unit and the state standards that this course aligns to, which are available on the Arizona Department of Education website. The public commenter accused Dr. Reynolds specifically of withholding information from board members Pingarelli and Doan at the December 10th meeting. How was he withholding information when
Ms.
board...
Wright, I apologize.
Yes?
Just careful with the names, please. Thank you.
At the last public comment, she was allowed to say both board members' names. How was he withholding information when a board member was reading from this document verbatim? Dr. Reynolds suggested twice during the December 10th board meeting that the board members could request a study session to look at the curriculum once it had been developed for the course, if it was approved that evening, which is the same process for all new courses. I want to thank all of the board members. You certainly don't agree on all issues the district is facing in these difficult and challenging times, but you've shown the ability to disagree with decorum, honesty, and respectful conversations. As a mother to 3 children that attend this district, I am proud of how this board conducts its business. Peoria community, who do you want representing you on this board? We deserve better than people who shout at the superintendent and wave their papers in the air with false accusations. Board members, Dr. Reynolds, thank you for leading with grace and with dignity. Dr. Reynolds, you deserve an apology from the public comment speaker for her false accusations. I do not believe she is here tonight. So I'd like to say I'm sorry that your integrity was called into question 2 weeks ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Pingarello, do you wish to make any comment? Okay. Okay, next public comment comes from Ms. Monica Martinez.
Good evening, everyone, again. Appreciate your time today and showing up. Today, I am actually speaking on behalf of my son. We've been in school for 16 days. He's a junior, and I felt it compelling enough to share openly that he is a special needs student, but he loves going to school, and that's because of his friends and his teachers. There are 2 topics I want to address specifically is his Arizona U.S. History course, which is one of his favorites aside from his passion, which is welding. And I asked him, why is it your favorite class? And most of you know this teacher. He is a coach, Mr. Richard Taylor. We often hear about him because of football. But this time I got to hear his name because how he leads a classroom. He told me, my son said, he starts his course with a quote. And in my mind, I said, well, what kind of quote is it? And he said, to be kind. That is social and emotional learning. He takes that quote and ties it into a U.S. history lesson, comes home and tells me what events took place, and then proceeds to tell me that he remembers the same girl in junior high school that he did wrong, went up to her at lunchtime and apologized and said he does not want to be that person. So I want to let the board know that we have a staff member who's leading by example and teaching U.S. history. There's another part of the topic I want to bring to your attention is the partnership that we have between Westmic and Peoria Unified School District in regards to dual enrollment. You see, my son lives for welding, and he knows he has to meet certain coursework to make that happen. Well, at the end of last year, we had a faux pas, but we've had strong administration. Ms. Lopez-Lira, I would like to call and give attention to her for her grace in helping us work through it. Dr. Peter Pangarelli on the Westmic School Board, and April Terrell, the counselor, who helped us work through the situation. He is now attending from 7 in the morning school, gets to Centennial High School, to school at 6:30, which I'm having somebody pick him up tonight because I'm here. But he loves it. The opportunity becomes math. When he went to welding class, the teacher told him he needs basic math skills. Unfortunately, I had him assessed in a private organization that said he had about 100 to 120 missing basic math skills. There is no math course that allows him to close that gap during this semester, so I'm paying $600 a month to help close that gap to meet Algebra 2 coursework next semester. He knows to be successful in welding, he needs to maintain his passing grade in Algebra 2. So my call to action to this board is 2 things. Continue your support of social and emotional learning and do a study session on how do we close these math gaps in academics. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Next public comment comes from Ms. Suzanne Yee. Okay, let me find her green stuff real quick. We don't seem to be able to find a green slip for Ms. Donna Bustos. So she does have one in, but it's specific to 10.7, which was pulled from consent. So she doesn't have one for. Okay, we do have a green slip from Ms. Victoria Bates.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to make this comment. I want to start off by thanking the board for your tireless and selfless dedication to the community. I know serving on this board takes up a significant amount of time out of your life, and I'm so grateful there are people like you willing to do this. I am a mother of 6. I have 5 kids of school age that are in the district. I have a kiddo in the special education program and one in the gifted program. I am also a product of the district. I was in the Peoria Unified School District from kindergarten all the way up to graduation from high school. I love PUSD. My husband and I, along with our children, are so happy that school is in person. I saw significant improvement in my kids' mood, self-esteem, and overall happiness when school resumed in person last September of 2020. We are hoping and praying we can stay in person. I'm coming today here to speak about masks. First of all, I want to start off by saying nobody actually wants masks in school. Nobody desires to see kids wearing masks and for teachers to have to wear masks all day while they do the tireless job of teaching. Despite this, masks are the best way to reduce the risk and spread of this virus. Last year, we had incredible mitigation standards that protected our kids. Now this year, when Delta is surging and affecting kids more than ever, we have pulled this safety net. My children have a right to a free and appropriate education. They have a right to attend school without being exposed to a dangerous and novel virus while they are unable to be vaccinated from it. School is the safest place for them to be physically and socially. Now we need to make it the safest place for them physically. I recently learned about the Pro-Children Act of 1994. For the first time ever, smoking was prohibited in schools. Lawmakers finally decided that enough was enough with children being exposed to the dangerous hazards of secondhand smoke. Children should be in an environment free from the spreading of viral vapors as much as possible, and masks can do this. I believe we can learn a lot from the Pro-Children Act of 1994 and put children first today. In 2021, it almost seems unimaginable that smoking was ever allowed in schools. However, there were actually people back in 1994 that opposed this act and thought it was a violation of a person's right and freedom. They believed that people deserved the right to smoke in any building. I find this absolutely absurd, and most people today would. If the people that opposed the Pro-Children Act of 1994 were here today, I believe they would be wearing purple. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bates. Okay. Next public comment comes from Ms. Kristen Frey.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before the board. My name is Kristen Frey, and I'm the parent of 3 children in the Peoria School District. You just saw my middle child, Olivia, who I think is amazing. I'm a healthcare worker, but I'm not a first responder. You see, I'm a last responder. I work in hospice. It's my job to support patients and families to help them be free of pain and anxiety and leave this earth with peace and dignity. The past 18 months have been incredibly difficult for healthcare workers. I've seen so many sad stories. Patients who got COVID from a younger family member, patients in a nursing home who caught COVID from a staff member who brought it in by accident, patients who got COVID, got better, only to die 6 months later from heart or lung issues that were exacerbated by COVID. And I see the impact this has on my fellow healthcare workers. We got into this field because we want to help others, but we're exhausted. I see a lot of burnout in my colleagues. We want to make people better, but it's hard to go to work every day and then come home and have somebody call me a socialist on the internet because we dare to suggest that everyone mask up to protect the common good. It's irresponsible to let COVID run through our schools. We know the Delta variant has an R0 value of 8, which means that each infected person can spread it to 8 other people. It's highly contagious, but I feel like we're not doing enough to stop it. We could be using masks. We could be social distancing, which we realistically know isn't happening. We could have daily temperature checks, random COVID testing, clear and effective quarantine procedures, but we aren't. We can do better. As a result, Arizona has already had 35 pediatric COVID deaths. That's right, 35 kids have died from COVID in our state. Banner reported that we had over 70 pediatric hospitalizations in August, that was last week, already surpassing the July net record, and that was double June. In fact, during this last week, we've already had a 10% increase in pediatric COVID hospitalizations. And with all these COVID cases, what about everyone else? What about the other kids? What about the kid who has cancer, the kid who falls off their bike? Their care will be delayed or denied, and everyone will be suffering because we can't just be responsible and take care of our own community. One final point. I've heard it said by numerous people that mitigation strategies hurt mental health. That's setting up a false choice, that we can address either COVID or mental health, because we can do both. And by working to stop COVID, by working to mitigate it, we're going to relieve stress and fears and anxieties and all kinds of things that will improve our kids' mental health. In conclusion, I urge you to enact a mask mandate for the Peoria district. Don't be bullied by a vocal minority. You have the power to do so, and it's the right thing to do.
Thank you, Ms. Frey. Next public comment comes from Mr. Josh Gray. I'm sorry, what's the name? Okay, Ms. Cannon.
I wanted to start out by saying thank you for allowing this time. I really empathize with everything you guys have been going through. I know that this entire time with COVID has been very challenging for the entire district and for all of you. I'd also like to personally thank Dr. Reynolds, President Sandoval, Dr. Bell. I've been in contact with some of you recently a great deal for some issues that personally affect my family. So thank you for taking the time to address those issues with me. We sit here at a time when COVID numbers in our area continue to increase. Currently, COVID rates for school-age children between 5 and 9 and 10 and 14 have surpassed the other age groups for the first time in this pandemic. Hospitalizations for school-age children are also at the highest that they've been during this pandemic. Last year, the district required masks and other mitigation measures, which helped to keep transmission rates low in the classroom. People often comment that if you want your child to wear a mask, that's your right to do so, just as if they don't want their child to wear a mask, that's their right. However, we're forgetting a very important part of freedom, which is that your freedom ends where mine begins. The way masking works in school is by source control. Source control is very different from respiratory protection, which is what we see in hospitals when doctors and nurses are wearing N95 masks. With source control, the benefits of masking can be seen even with relatively flimsy masks because they prevent the spread of aerosol particles, which is what the virus transfers with. So if an asymptomatic or a pre-symptomatic child coughs or sneezes, but they're wearing a mask, it now prevents or reduces the spread of the virus in the classroom. In fact, even Maricopa County guidelines suggest that if a COVID positive student is next to a close contact student and both students were properly wearing masks, then the close contact does not need to quarantine. It seemed like a win-win. We want our kids in school. We don't want them out quarantining. If we have proper masking, we can alleviate that problem. I'd also like to remember a group of Peoria students that seems to have been forgotten by the district, as well as a lot of the families that are fighting against masks. And those are the high-risk students. These are students in our district that can't risk exposure to COVID at the rates that we're seeing in schools right now. They have health conditions like diabetes or asthma or other underlying issues. Being high risk for these children is not a preference, it's not a choice, it's the reality of their lives. Oftentimes, a solution given for these children is to have them stay home or to go to a virtual option. But those options don't consider the rights that these children have to in-person education. These children also have rights to be in person learning with their teachers in a classroom. By not making schools safe for all children, we are discriminating against these high-risk children. Our job as a district is to make education safe and effective for every child. And I beg of you guys to start making decisions to that effect, including masking and mitigation.
Thank you, Ms. Cannon. Next public comment comes from, I believe it's either Daniel or Daryl Leinhardt.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for listening to me. I just wanted to talk about the quarantining subject. Again, I know I spoke on it a little bit earlier about the inefficiency of distance learning, at least in my home. So I acknowledge that our new regulations have come down from the county health department, but frankly, I'm tired of feeling strong-armed by the government, and I'm not going, like, I'm not trying to be controversial, sorry, but we can't continue to send our kids home for time after time after time again for almost 2 weeks. I have smaller kiddos that have missed enough school in the last 2 years. I would like to see POSD come up with our own protocol for COVID exposure, and my suggestion would be maybe to require the exposed child to wear a mask since they are so effective for the time that they will be in quarantine rather than sending them home for nearly 2 weeks. We're already close to last in the national education rankings, and to add to this problem sounds irresponsible and kind of silly. There has to be a better solution. This is getting out of hand. Rather than coming up with a solution, everybody just wants to fight about vaccines and masks. Well, we're never going to agree on this collectively, so I'm asking with a logical mind and a kind heart for us to please come up with a solution outside of distance learning. I understand that we feel this is out of our hands because it's coming from the county health department, but who cares? Like, I know that sounds crazy, but like genuinely, I'm curious, like, what can they do? They're going to shut the whole entire school down? You know, what are they going to do? As far as masks, if we're going to require a mask, then do we eliminate quarantining altogether if a child is not showing active symptoms? Like, what's that going to look like? And furthermore, like, when it comes down to it, if our kids have to be put in masks to keep them in school, that's fine. Do I want my kids wearing a mask? No, that's not how I want my kindergartner or my first grader and my third grader to view school. But at the end of the day, if their butts are in a seat, whatever. Like, at this point, I'm so done fighting. I'm sure you guys are all tired of hearing of it. Like, we have to find a solution, and I feel like nobody wants a solution. Everybody just wants to be right. So we have to come up with our own solutions. As far as the county health department, they can, you know, I can't say mean things here in front of people, but I'm over it. I'm done with the county health department. I'm done with the governor. I'm done. Like, they obviously are not here to support us. The only time the governor wants to say anything is when he either doesn't agree with it or when he does agree with it. So, like, we're on our own, which other school districts have displayed the same kind of behavior, that they don't care what anybody else is saying. They're doing what they want to do. So what are we going to do to protect our kids? We cannot sit here on two different sides of the rooms, one with masks, one without masks, and fight anymore. Like, we have to find a solution. Sending our kids home for 2 weeks is not a healthy solution for our children. And I understand that. I'm sure it can't be a blanket solution because high school is going to look very different than elementary school, and I understand that. But we have to find a solution. And if I have told you guys all before when we were going through this last year, I work a lot. But I am willing to put time aside to come and help find a solution.
Ms. Leinhardt, thank you very much.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Next public comment comes from Ms. Lori Romero.
Hello, Governing Board, Superintendent. My name is Lori Romero. I am also a product of the Peoria School District, Peoria Elementary and Sunrise Mountain High School. And I now have a 6th grader that is at Country Meadows. And I am currently stuck between a rock and a hard place. I have a 10-year-old, like I said, 6th grader at Country Meadows. If you were to see him, he would just look like your average healthy kid. Running around, wants to play outside with his friends, wants to go to school, average looking 6th grader. But he has lupus. And when he was diagnosed with lupus last year, it ravaged his entire body. He could not walk to the bathroom. He had inflammation of his heart, his lungs. It became emergent when it attacked his optic nerve. He almost lost the sight in his right eye. Thankfully, we are now considered in remission. However, if he were to get COVID, it would have devastating effects on him. He does wear a mask at school when he practices all the recommended habits to reduce his risk. When he plays outside, he eats lunch, he takes his mask off, and he does so with children that don't wear a mask. Last year, he spent half the year doing online learning. He also has a diagnosis of ADHD and epilepsy, which requires special attention to keep him focused and on task. I'm a single working mom, and I can't have him doing online learning without assistance. He belongs in the classroom. How can I count on my son being safe when I send him to school around kids that don't wear a mask, increasing his risks? I'm not naive. I know even when the kids are required to wear a mask, there's a risk potential, but a far less risk as masks do reduce the spread of this virus. My son has 3 specialists, all at Phoenix Children's Hospital, and a PCP that all want him to be on the list for the vaccine when it comes available, but it's not. His only protections are those put in place by this governing board. His mask protects you, your mask protects him. Where are my son's protections? My opinion, banning mask requirements at schools during a pandemic is an attack on the most at-risk, vulnerable population of children. We're the families that have followed the science, done what was necessary to keep ourselves, our kids, others safe. In the classroom is where my son should be. But with policies like this, it makes me consider calling this year a wash, pulling him out of school altogether since there's nowhere protected for him to go. I hope you can understand my dilemma here when I respectfully ask that this governing board consider an emergency meeting to discuss and implement a mask mandate for the safety and protection of all the kids and their families by listening to public health officials regarding proper safety measures for public health. And I just have one more thing to say. The governor does want you guys to be incentivized for weaponizing COVID against our kids like mine, but my son's right to being healthy at school doesn't stop where others' freedom to not wear a mask violates theirs. So please just consider that.
Thank you, Ms. Romero. We have time for a couple more public comments. This next public comment comes from Ms. Jennifer Jacobs.
Hey, Board. I'm here to speak for one of my sons. I have 2 boys in their senior year. One's at Liberty and one's at Centennial. One's bobbing and weaving through the COVID mitigation strategies, and one is not. He's been in an inpatient hospital twice in the last 9 months. He's had a plan to commit suicide, and if I had set a code on my gun safe, he wouldn't be here. He cannot deal with mitigations, masks, quarantining, set him back. When I spoke earlier, he just went back today after an 11-day quarantine. His twin brother in the next room got to go off to school every day while he sat home. Yesterday, he was supposed to be back in school. He didn't get up and go. I understand all of you are worried for your kids. Everybody has a story. If you're not sending your kid to school with an N95 mask, then you're not doing everything you can. No pity, but no threatening to pull my kid. My son can't go back to the way it was last year. They've been going through this since their sophomore year. My other son, whether you make masks mandatory or not, he'll be staying in school. But his twin brother won't be because he can't. So I get all of you are worried. We all have problems at home. Don't make blanket statements that we don't want to keep kids safe. So if you guys vote for mask mandates, make it count. Make it mandatory N95 masks. Don't make my son go to school wearing a piece of cloth that's not as effective as an N95 mask. That's what I ask of you. If you're going to mandate it, mandate N95. Make it count. And while you're deciding that, keep the faceless faces of all the kids that are dealing with mental health problems. Maybe on the email we get sent out every week for the COVID numbers, we can have the cases of inpatient mental health patients in this district since COVID started. I'm a part of a group. None of the parents want to come up here and talk about that. We don't want to air our dirty laundry. I don't want to come out my son. Some of his friends that know me recognize me up here. He don't want his business out here. How about suicides in our district? I know of one. Put that on the email you send out every week. You can't just consider one side of the coin. And everybody else, quit fighting. It's disheartening to hear everybody. I sit home at home and watch this online.
Ms. Jacobs.
Arguing.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Next public comment comes from Aaron Belcombe. Okay.
Hi, thank you. I think there's a lot of confusion as far as quarantining and all that goes on. Somebody called the Arizona COVID line to get clarification, so I just want to play that since that's actually from the COVID line, so that we can hear what they say, because this is confusing.
Yeah, I just had a question. If my school calls and they say that my child has been in close contact from a kid in their classroom, and they're saying to quarantine for 10 days, is that a thing like mandatory, or is that something that's just like a suggestion that we do?
Yeah. Ms. Smith, I apologize. I mean, public comment really has to be coming from you, not...
I understand, but we're all confused by this. We're told sometimes you're supposed to quarantine, sometimes you're not supposed to quarantine. This is directly from the state. No, they answered the phone. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. They said that it is a recommendation. If your child is not positive, it's a recommendation, even from the state. They cannot force a child that does not have a positive test to quarantine. That is ultimate. No one's going to believe it from my mouth, so that's why I'm trying to play it from their mouth, because that's what they told this dad that called, because there's so much confusion. The reason why I'm bringing that up, I know people who in this first month of school, their kid has been quarantined 2, some of them 3 times already in a month of school. And they've never been sick. And we don't keep data on whether quarantined kids actually end up sick or not. So it's like we keep doing the same thing over and over. We don't have data that shows that this is actually purposeful, like quarantining over and over and over, but those kids are never being sick. But they're in a month of school missing 20, 30 days within a month. This is the 3rd year that these kids' education has been disrupted. Their learning is impacted, their mental health. Speaking as to what you have, I have a good friend of mine. Her son is a junior in high school. He will not go to school anymore. He said, I'm not going. It's pointless. I haven't had a normal year of high school. I'm not learning anything. My assignments get excused anyway if I get quarantined, so really that shows me there's no point to school. He's basically a junior who's had his whole high school ruined and robbed, and he's given up. He doesn't want to go to school anymore. He's made threats, like you say. I have another friend who has a 3rd grader that sleeps in a mask because they're so scared and now has to go to therapy because their anxiety is so bad that you have a 3rd grader sleeping with a mask on. So we need to understand why we're doing the things we're doing. If we're a month into school and we've quarantined one child 2 to 3 times, this is going to go on all year long. Why even send your kid to school at that point? What's the point? They're not there. They've missed 20 to 30 days in a month of school.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Thank you, everybody, for your comments this evening. That does conclude our call to the public. Those individuals who did not have the opportunity to speak this evening, we do have other channels that will allow you to communicate and send your comments and questions to the district via email or certainly through the governing board input form. Thank you again for all those who expressed their thoughts this evening. Okay, moving on to section, I apologize. Let's see here. We do have that one item that we pulled from consent, right, Ms. Contra?
Yes, President Sandoval, it's a section 11.1.
11.1, okay. Yep, we do have public comment on this particular line item. So at this point, I would like to call up Ms. Donna Bartos. Ms. Contra, can you please read the line item real quick? I want to make sure that, just read the label of 11.1.
Yes, sir. It's Arizona State University AmeriCorps Survivor Link Memorandum of Understanding with the Peoria Unified School District.
All right, thank you for that. Ms. Bartos, welcome.
Hello, Board. Hello, Superintendent. Thank you for the opportunity. I just have to say, the very first board meeting I attended, I screwed up and face planted and broke my foot. The very second board meeting that I'm attending, I screwed up and didn't realize that that was a consent item agenda. So I apologize. I put it down because I wanted to speak in support of that MOU. Am I able to do that? Or I don't know the protocol. I completely bypassed it, so I apologize.
Yeah.
Speak?
Yes?
In support of that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, just as long as you stay specific to the line item.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you. And it has intersecting with everything that has been talked about tonight. I'm Donna Bartos, mom to a Sunrise Mountain High School senior, and in my professional life, an advocate for the prevention of domestic, sexual, teen dating violence, gender-based violence, stalking, bullying, and other forms of interpersonal violence, as well as the provision of school-based wraparound support services for all students, those who witness domestic violence at home, those who experience dating violence or sexual assault, those who are victimized, those who are perpetrating, and those who are peers who are witnessing this stuff going on. COVID is impacting every layer of life, including the basic safety and well-being of students, staff, and families impacted by domestic violence. Since COVID hit last year in early 2020 till present, here in Arizona, we are seeing an increase in domestic violence-related homicides by 140% in the Phoenix metro area. While vetted studies are not yet available to measure other impacts, COVID has, and we can make the leap, know that it has increased domestic violence prevalence and lethality. Students, staff, and families in the Peoria Unified School District are not immune. A kid who is not safe at home or in their relationships cannot show up ready to learn at school. So the purpose of my public comment regarding this agenda item, which I did not realize was a consent item, I did not have my readers on when looking at it, is that I am in full support of this. Not because domestic violence is a huge issue that we need to make sure our students and our staff and our families have full support in the most logical place in school-based settings. But with COVID surging again and domestic violence numbers up, now is not the time to scale back support. It is time to scale up. As a mother and an advocate for the prevention of domestic violence, I am acutely aware that every time I send my son to high school, I am taking a risk and putting my trust in school personnel, his parents, his trusted adults at school, his peers in his classes, that protective factors are in place for every student, every day, every time, especially now. Protective factors are the factors that reduce the risk of a young person using violence to cope with feelings of powerlessness. They are family and parent support, caring and trusted adults and teachers on campus, the ability to show and express empathy, positive peer relationships, healthy coping style, and communities that support violence prevention. Without bold mitigation standards, COVID
Ms.
carelessness
Bartos.
disrupts all of these.
I apologize. Time is up.
That's okay. I didn't see the timer running, so I wasn't sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Board members, any further discussion, comments on 10.7, the Arizona State University AmeriCorps Survivor Link Memorandum of Understanding with Peoria Unified School District? Ms. Hill?
None at this time, thank you.
All right. Ms. Underhill?
No, I don't have any comments. Thank you.
Representative Pingarelli? Yeah. Me neither. So I do need a motion to approve 11.1, which again is the Arizona State University AmeriCorps Survivor Link Memorandum of Understanding.
I move to approve 11.1, the ASU AmeriCorps Survivor Link Memorandum of Understanding.
I will second.
Ms. Contra, we have a motion by Ms. Underhill and a second by Ms. Hill. Board members, please cast your votes. Motion passes, 4 yeas, 1 absent. Thank you, board members. All right, moving on to Section 12, action items, 12.1, Peoria Unified's virtual instructional time model for the 2021-2022 school year. Dr. Bell?
Thank you. I wanted to add a couple of things that are included in our presentation later to clarify our expectations in moving forward with teaching and learning during a time that school, in-person school may be interrupted. We have been visiting and talking with our teams in terms of what we've learned from virtual instruction, as well as what we've learned from eCampus. So we've got to tighten up, I know, on that communication and steps and make it super clear what needs to happen at the schools. In this case, principals will notify teachers of students who are in isolation or beginning the quarantine on day 1. There needs to be immediate contact by the student, by the teacher to the student and/or parents to prepare the learning plan for the time in isolation and for home learning. That the teacher will contact that student, decide what resources are needed, including laptops. We have dusted off, if you will, our laptop distribution for students, starting with the high school level and moving down into elementary the subsequent week after that, so that students can be able to access all assignments in that mode, knowing that some teachers may not need that. They may be assigning consumables or paper pencil learning activities. The teacher will be checking in with students for a minimum of 3 times per week for a minimum of 30 minutes. So this is to provide additional support for students learning from home. We want our teachers to establish office hours for a minimum of 30 minutes per week to provide students with the opportunity for additional support, to take parent phone calls or student phone calls. The teacher may provide live virtual lessons via Teams for concurrent teaching, both in person and at home, and that laptop suggestion is something, again, that will make sure kids have the necessary device and/or hotspot if needed. Additionally, Dr. Davidson and I have been talking about bringing our principals together to underscore these expectations and to make sure that they have a site communication plan that moves from the office or nurse's office when students are in a quarantine back to all the teachers that touch that particular student.
Thank you for that further detail, Dr. Bell.
Thank you.
Yep. Further questions, comments, board members? Ms. Hill?
None at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. Ms. Underhill?
No, thank you for that clarification. So it sounds like we're underway of, identifying some specifics about the time as we move forward into this continued unknown. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Underhill. Representative Pingarelli?
No, not at this time.
Thank you. Yeah, Dr. Bell, thank you for the additional information. Again, a solution, you used the term in an emergency, and obviously we're in a pretty adverse situation now from a health crisis perspective, and we need to make sure that our students are continuing to learn. Teachers continue to teach in environments where our students are not in the classroom. So thank you again for the further details.
Thank you.
With that said, board members, I do need a motion to approve Peoria Unified's virtual instructional time model for the 2021-2022 school year.
I move to approve the Peoria Unified Virtual Instruction Time Model for the 2021-22 school year as presented.
Now I'll second that. Ms. Contra, we have a motion by Ms. Underhill and a second by myself. Board members, please cast your votes. Motion passes, 3 yeas, 1 nay, and 1 absent. Thank you, board members. All right. Moving on to 12.2, consideration of revision number 1 to the Maintenance and Operations District Additional Assistance and Classroom Site Fund budgets for fiscal year 2021-2022. Ms. Myers, anything additional that you would like to comment on?
Well, thank you, President Sandoval, members of the governing board. I do not have any additional information to add at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Board members, questions, comments? Any additional questions, comments? Ms. Hill? Okay, thank you. Ms. Underhill?
No, just thank you again for the thorough presentation.
Representative Pink? Thank you, Ms. Pengarelli. Yes, Ms. Myers, thank you very much for, as always, the very complete and robust presentation, so thank you. That said, I do need a motion to approve 12.2, consideration of revision number 1 to the Maintenance and Operations District Additional Assistance and Classroom Site Fund budgets.
I move to approve the consideration of revision number 1 to the Maintenance and Operation District Additional Assistance and Classroom Site Fund budgets for fiscal year 2021 and 2022.
I will second.
Okay. Ms. Contra, we have a motion by Representative Pingarelli and a second by Ms. Hill. Board members, please cast your votes. Motion passes, 4 yeas, 1 absent. Thank you, board members. All right, moving on to discussion items. 13.1, health data and COVID mitigation updates. We do have a few public comment slips tied to the slide item. We will hear from the district and then the public, and the board members will go through any questions, comments that we may have. So, Mr. Moss, welcome, sir.
Thank you, President Sandoval, members of the governing board, here again to provide for you some data about how COVID is impacting our district. Gotta make sure we get it. Go to there. As you can see, our numbers continue to rise. Obviously not as quickly as they have in the past. A little bit of an increase in cases, much less than the 105 or so we had the week before, but this was only about a 25 increase. Again, we'll talk about the percent positive as a decline, but as we've tracked, that's a result mostly of more tests being given. I think the tests have gone from 78,000 to 120,000 or so in a week. And so that number is more people getting tested. You have a smaller percentage of positives while still getting more greater cases. In terms of our district data, we provided some for you last week. 431 students have tested and confirmed cases since August the 4th. That's an increase of 151 from the numbers we talked about last week of 250, or 280, excuse me. In staff, we've had 45 who've tested positive there. That's an increase of 25 in the week that we have spoken to you since last Thursday. And our recommended quarantine, 1478, is actually about 100 lower than where we were a week ago on Thursday. The outbreaks, as we've talked about in the past, is a situation where the county has determined that it is reasonable that the students caught it from other students at the school. And so we have had 15 of those, including 2 today. That's an increase of 8 from the number that we presented last Thursday, which was 7. And so we've had a significant number of those in the last week. COVID doesn't just have impact on the students, but also we started looking at some data about teacher absences. And you can see our weekly average, our weekly numbers of teachers who have called in or who have claimed illness on their time request to be off. Again, this is not all teachers that are absent. There are teachers absent for other reasons. but this is only the ones who have stated that they have illness for that day. And you can see sometimes there, that 339 is quite large in a population for a week. Our substitute fill rate has to do with the percentage of substitutes that we get to take these classrooms. And this is our overall sub-fill rate. And so you see our sub-fill rate there has gone down. And again, as you get more absences, the pool of subs is similar in size. And so you're not going to get as many to fill as you get more absences in that process. We've had some conversation with parents in the last week or so about getting students into some of our online opportunities. And you can see that we do have a waiting list there. We thought that number was a little bit higher than that in the last week or so, but we've been able to look and talk about where some of those students really are today. And so that's the list that we have. And I know that we're putting a plan together for finding a way to get them into that online environment as quickly as possible. These students are still attending our schools on a daily basis. And we were looking at a way to meet the needs of their parents who have requested that they be online. And I believe Dr. Carter has some other information for you. Right. Do you have questions for me, or you want to come back to this, or how would you like to?
No, thank you, Mr. Moss. I like that idea. I think any questions, comments? Well, we do have some public comment tied to this line item, so tell you what, let's go through the deck, and then we'll go through public comment. And then, thank you.
All right, President Sandoval, members of the board, Dr. Reynolds, and guests. As you know, we presented much of this information last week in our study session, but I think the reason why we brought it back tonight is just to let our public know and to let you all know that we are listening. Also, we realize we need to act according to our data. And so tonight I'm just going to highlight a few pieces that demonstrate that we're doing a little bit more, okay? Also, as we continue in this presentation, you will see some bolded items, and those are probably the items I'll just spend a little bit of time referencing as we go through this slide deck here. This first slide, I think, as I said last week, it talks about how our parents are our partners, and these are some mitigation strategies we ask our community to support us with before our children even come to school. So some real basic things there, but bottom line, the thing that I would add on this is, please, if you are sick, do not come to school. If you are COVID positive, report that to your school and do not bring it to the campus. As we look at our campus procedures, these items, again, were presented last week, things that we already do when our students come to the school building. The important piece here is that we continue to communicate with our leaders and are working very, very hard and are mandating seating charts established in all of our classrooms to include our arts programs, PE, things like that. So just wanted to highlight that as a stronger campus procedure. And a lot of these things I'll just share with you are going to be seen in our back to school plan that's on our website. This is something that we continue to modify and it will continue to evolve, beginning to look a little bit more like last year's plan as we're opening up our schools. Additional mitigation efforts, hand washing, basic sanitation, making certain that we are improving social distancing at lunches, in particular in our high schools and elementary schools, and better use of our space. We have found that in conversation with our school principals, we can do a better job inside of our cafeterias, things like that. So that was something we wanted to highlight today. From a cleaning and disinfecting perspective, continue to highlight the efforts of Mr. Deeg and his team, as well as our partners, that when we need, first of all, when we need to disinfect, our schools have the needed supplies that are necessary to disinfect in case of a positive COVID case, but also we are working hard to increase the cleaning of high touch point areas in our schools as well as district spaces. As we look at our extracurricular areas, we know that our COVID data has been elevated, but we also want to support extracurricular events and field trips. And you'll see a variety of newer things here compared to last week. One of the things that we'll be continuing to reinforce with our leaders is a mitigation plan, a safety plan of sorts when we're having activities to ensure that things like social distancing are discussed and reviewed, mitigation strategies, opportunities for people to wash hands, things like that. We continue to look at our field trips on a case-by-case basis. You see here that we are really incorporating AIA strategies, things that are given to us from the AA, which typically, well, we know that it does, governs high school athletics. We're using that in our elementary schools. Also, we are going to currently suspend and reassess this at the end of December, our out-of-state travel for students. Just a lot of unknowns in some of those trips, so that's currently where we are there. And also, you see the limiting of volunteers and visitors on campus. We made it very clear with our admin team to allow our parents in or guests in for true educational purposes only at this point. From an isolation and quarantine perspective, there's been an update from the county's notification process for our K-12 students in need of quarantining, and we certainly heard our public comment tonight. You can see here that there are exemptions to quarantine, and those are listed on this slide as they were last week as well. Been working a lot this week with our school leaders, our health professionals, to go through this process and to ensure that our community, and especially those parents and families that are impacted, have the communication that is necessary, demonstrating that it is the county that is quarantining their students, and Peoria is certainly following through. Dr. Bell recently presented some of this information on how we hope to support our students when they are in a quarantine or an isolation status. We're just going to say thank you to our curriculum and instruction department for their work on putting this draft, not draft I should say, but these basic principles out. But I want our staff to know, those that are listening, our principals, that we're going to continue to capture their voices on how we can best provide an education to our students. If we heard it tonight, we know we need to do better by our students. And so certainly the voice of our educators, the voice of our leaders will need to come into play in this. Just a few things that I highlight here that Dr. Bell spoke to is greater teacher and parent communication, a learning plan that is created with student and family input, as well as core instruction, access to the curriculum. So an important piece to us here in this COVID mitigation. From there, I believe Ms. Ari will speak a little bit about our COVID response team and our metrics that we use in working with our schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Davidson.
Good evening, President Sandoval, members of the board, Dr. Reynolds, and the guests that have joined us in person and virtually this evening. I'm going to share with you a little bit more about some of our communication efforts and metrics and some of the things that Dr. Davidson shared are some updates for this week. Our COVID response team, as you have heard us refer to them, is the team here at the district office that supports our schools as cases arise. So sometimes there is some elevated concern in some way, sometimes there is a unique case, and this team steps in to offer support in a variety of ways, working with the site leader, the rest of the team at the school, as well as the school nurse. From a communication standpoint, the school is the primary point of communication unless there are district-wide changes in our plan. We do continue to update at the site, here at the district office, our dashboard. We do that each week and monitor and track cases by school site and break those down on our website by staff and students. This model you'll see to the right side of the screen is our framework for a potential change in instruction, also for reviewing with a site when there are some elevated levels of concern at a particular school. I'll highlight for you, because it has been just a little while since we brought this model forward and kind of talked through it for our community. There are a couple of colors that you'll see there, a blue color that monitors for absenteeism, and when there is a concern where there may be 10% of in-person students that are absent due to any of the COVID-like symptoms, that is something that is a concern that we look to. Also, the cases by site, and that is that kind of a yellow or greenish looking square there. And then we also look at the overall impact at a school, and that is the reddish square. We're looking at 10% of staff that are out for illness, or 25% of our students that might be out for any particular reasons. And that might include those quarantines or any other type of illness on a campus. What happens is when we see that we are having an an elevated concern in any one of those, our COVID response team joins with the joins with the school team, their nurse, our lead nurse on a call, and we talk through all of those different metrics. We consider a number of the other factors that you see there in the model, and then we also review the site's mitigation plan. We look at, are there areas where we could do better? Are there other things that we need to change within their plan? Are there any other concerns we need to take into consideration? This school year, we have run through the process 4 times, twice at the elementary and twice for our high schools. And in all of those cases, we have made modifications to the mitigation plan on those schools. In a couple of cases, we have had to add or enhance some communication to those sites in order to make sure we could continue to monitor for any other changes. I want to talk just briefly about COVID-19 testing, as this is becoming a bit of a challenge in our community. We do have staff and families that have reached out to us because there is a lack of testing in our community. We're finding that our families are having to wait longer to receive test results. Maricopa County has addressed this with all schools just in the last couple of weeks as well. And they have responded with a program that is through the Arizona Department of Health Services, where they are receiving an allocation of tests that are specifically for schools, public schools, charters as well, to receive an allotment. We have reached out to them to request an allotment for our schools, and we expect to have them within the next couple of weeks. A couple of just key points relative to those tests. They are the Binax Now tests, and they are at-home tests. So they are to be given to either staff or to parents of students that may have a need. They are not for students to test out of quarantine, but they are in fact for either staff or students that are symptomatic and there are concerns that there is illness. I will tell you it is a very small allocation of tests, and so roughly 20 tests per school. That's not very many when you consider a district of our size. We have, however, expressed to the county, they are hearing from districts that already have received their allotment of tests, that there is a demand for additional tests, at least until we probably get through the next few weeks. So we will update our community once we have those tests and once we have a process in place on how we may make sure they go to those who need them. I also just have a note on this slide relative to the types of tests that we accept in our school district. They are only the PCR or antigen tests, and if it is a home test that is submitted, it does have to be one of those Binax Now tests so that we can make sure we can determine the validity of that test. Lastly, I want to share that we're in the process of updating our mitigation plan. So if you're looking for it on our website, again, as Dr. Davidson shared, we're in the process of making some enhancements, making sure that we are really adding to that plan, and we have pulled it down to make those additions. We do expect to have it up by the end of the day tomorrow for our community. And at this time, we'll turn it back over to you, Dr. Sandoval, for any questions from the team or any public comments.
Thank you, Ms. Ari. We'll now go into public comment tied to this line item, and then we'll get into further discussion between the board. First public comment tied to 13.1 comes from Jacqueline Ehrenberg. She's left. Thank you. Next public comment is from Ms. Colleen Martin.
Good evening, Superintendent Dr. Reynolds and school board members. My name is Colleen Martin. I am a parent in Peoria. I am a registered nurse, and I'm a volunteer with multiple public health agencies for Arizona's COVID response. I want to begin by thanking you all for your hard work on behalf of our students. I recognize this has not been an easy year and a half for anyone. The staff and teachers have worked hard to provide quality education to every child. For that, I thank you and the teachers. I understand that my opinions are not shared by everyone, and just as I respect their right to their opinion, I trust the same respect will be shared. Today, I'm here to speak about our district's COVID response. Arizona is currently experiencing a COVID surge, with cases having tripled over the last month, coinciding with the arrival of the highly contagious Delta variant in the state. States all over the country are seeing an increase in cases among the unvaccinated, and this includes a drastic increase in children's hospitalizations, many yet who cannot be eligible for a vaccine. The Academy of Pediatrics reported that cases among U.S. children and teens have jumped 84% in 1 week. Arizona is second in the nation for pediatric deaths related to COVID, according to data published recently by the Academy of Pediatrics. While children are still thankfully less likely to die or require hospitalization than adults, many are still developing long-term COVID, and there is now concern for significant cognitive impairments related to COVID infection, which we will not know till down the line. We all want safe in-person learning. We all want to protect our children. Until school-age children have the option to be vaccinated against COVID, we need to continue to protect them. That includes masking. Masking helps students with in-person education. Per the Maricopa Department of Public Health, masked children who are exposed to a COVID-positive child who also wears a mask, they don't have to isolate. Wearing a mask seems a small price to continue for in-person education. I understand that many parents believe that if I feel a mask is important, then I should just have my child wear a mask. However, that is not how masking works. Even if a child has a mask on, they can easily be infected by other children that are not wearing a mask. That is why for all children who choose in-person schooling to wear a mask, I'm asking for the district to hold an emergency session to discuss masking. I brought it with me, but I have a letter that has been circulating in our community for only a few days. We have now collected 243 signatures of parents and other members who would like to see masking. I can share that with you at the end of the meeting if you like that letter and the signatures. Thank you.
Please. Thank you, Ms. Martin. Final public comment tied to this line item is Mr. Josh Gray.
All right. Thank you, President Sandoval, members of the board, Superintendent Reynolds, auxiliary staff. I'm not going to forget you guys this time. Sorry about that. I want to start off first of all by thanking the board and the district for having a crisis line for students. I saw that the other day that you guys are offering that. I think that's awesome. Taking the mental health of your students seriously and offering that to them, offering them that outlet is a really thing to be proud of. So I definitely appreciate that from the district. And I want to thank you for letting us into that recent study session you were speaking about. I personally learned a lot from that, and I understand why not all of it could be public. I get my legal advice in private too. It's a good move. So during that meeting, President Sandoval, you asked, are we doing everything we can to protect our students? The answer is no. I'm going to take that a step further. I'm going to challenge the board. Are you doing everything you can to protect our students, our staff, and our community? Are you doing everything you can to keep them safe? This week I spoke with a nurse who worked in the COVID unit all last year, never tested positive. Her husband is a teacher in this district. Her kids go to school in this district. No one in her unit has tested positive for COVID, but now the whole family has it. The kids or the teacher brought it home, and now the whole family has it. So this goes to the point that these cases we see, they don't happen in a vacuum. These are families that are affected by this every single day. This isn't a time for inaction. Again, I know the board feels that it's bound by the legislation passed by the 47 Republicans, but I also know that that law hasn't taken effect yet, and it's currently being challenged in court by multiple different lawsuits. For this reason, I'm also calling on the board to act, hold an emergency session, and take a vote on a mask mandate. Up or down, make a choice. But doing nothing is not acceptable right now for the community or for the students. At this point, we need the board to be divisive, or I'd rather have the board be divisive than indecisive. We need action to happen. Take a stand, because every day you wait, it's an exposure to another child or a teacher or a member of the community. We have a right to safe schools. My daughter has a right to a safe learning environment. Please do the right thing for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. All right, that concludes public comment tied to this line item. Board members, questions, comments for the district or for discussion? Ms. Hill.
Yes, I guess I have a few. Firstly, I just wanted to, and I don't know if this is a question for you, Ms. Airy, but I wanted to see if you could answer for me the quarantine issue, just to make sure I understand it as well. Should the scenario, if a vaccinated or even unvaccinated student or employee of PUSD be in contact with someone who got COVID and they're quarantined, is there a way for them to get the rapid test, and should it prove that they do not have COVID, that they can return to school?
President Sandoval, Mrs. Hill, thank you for that question. So the Maricopa County Department of Health does address that, and in their requirements, they do outline that if you are a close contact, you may test on day 6 or 7 of the quarantine period and potentially return on day 8 if you receive a negative test.
So they have to be quarantined for over a week, even if they're healthy. So I guess that's just what I'm trying to wrap my head around. So even if they got a rapid test the day after they were informed that they were in contact with someone with COVID, had the rapid test, came back clear, they still have to be quarantined for over a week and miss school, right?
According to Maricopa County's quarantine, yes.
Okay, good for me to understand how this mitigation strategy is working, if I agree with it or not. And as far as, this is just another question too that was from, and maybe this is a question for Mr. Davidson, was teacher absences, and it referred to illness, but that's not specific to COVID. That's just illness related, right?
Mr. Sandoval, Ms. Hill, yes, that's correct. That's illness. We are not, under HIPAA, we are not allowed to ask the question why they are ill. And so we get the determination that, yes, I'm ill, but there's not a connection to that directly to COVID or not.
Okay, that helps me clear that up then a little bit as well. All these questions I have. I also have a question about this wait list for the elementary students and the high school students. Maybe you could explain to me a little bit how exactly it works. Are they waiting for a spot to open up? Are we in the process of creating more room for them or another class for them? How exactly are we trying to accommodate these students on the wait list?
President Sandoval, Ms. Hill, exactly. All of the above. We asked them all to, we gave them a time period about right before school that they could sign up for virtual instruction for the whole time, for the semester. We staffed it with teachers. Over time, those classrooms became full, and we took students as fast as we could until we got to that point. We've had a number of them in the last few weeks attempt to get on there, get on that list. We have given them, as part of our plan, that we would automatically review attendance after the first 9 weeks so that we get grades to close and those types of situations. But in the short term, we are looking for additional teachers. Anybody want to be an online teacher? We are looking for additional teachers that we can put in place immediately to get the students who have been requested in the last 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks to get onto that and into that environment.
Great. And does that, just from looking at these numbers, the 57 elementary students and the 10 high school students, is that number rising or is it lowering? Are we kind of getting on top of it, or is the number?
President Sandoval, Ms. Hill, that's one of the hardest questions to answer. The question is whether or not there is, because the parents are aware that there's a waiting list, there's always the question as to whether there is additional demand that we're not aware of. And so if we were able to add the 5 or 6 teachers that we're looking for, we would then have some ability to add some additional demand, for additional demand if others were to come forward.
Thank you for that. And I have kind of I'm not sure who would answer this. My last question is, I noticed that it mentioned that children should bring, or students should bring, a water bottle to school, obviously, so you don't have to use a water faucet and put your mouth on it, which kids do. Not sanitary. Do we have, I know if you go to theme parks, or some places, they have these really cool things where you put the water bottle up and you can actually fill it with good, clean water. Do we have anything like that, or where are they supposed to fill their bottles?
President Sandoval and Ms. Hill, the answer is yes. Our schools do have those particular water fountains available for our students, but of course we also have the very traditional water fountains as well. And last year those fountains were shut off. This year they are open for use, and so that's why we are highlighting that we would ask our students to come with their own bottles.
Oh, great. Okay, I wasn't sure because I knew that they were like taped off and so forth, so I didn't know if they didn't have access to water or how we were doing that, if you had a water bottle but you couldn't refill it, all those problems. So I just wanted to make sure they actually have access to refill the water bottle as needed. So that's cool that we have the ones like they have at theme parks, so awesome. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Hill. Dr. Davidson, I believe, or Mr. Moss, I want to piggyback on one of the questions that Ms. Hill had around the number of teachers that are out due to illness. Do we know what that number looked like, let's say academic year prior to COVID during the same time frame?
I don't believe, Mr. Sandoval, that we came prepared for that, but certainly I know that Ms. Vesley and her team could prepare that for a Friday report just for the board's information.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Yep. Ms. Underhill?
Yeah. So first of all, I just want to say thank you so much. Not on. For going back and, looking back at the mitigation plan and obviously strengthening it and, putting it back into place, and just, I guess I feel like we are, back at emphasizing that these things are required, that these things are necessary, that we are truly addressing, the COVID pandemic within our schools. And so I know that at the study session, I was kind of grilling some folks about that, but I do feel like we have definitely kind of upped our game within the last week, and I'm really glad to see that. I do have a few questions. One of the things I was curious about was you were talking about the rapid tests. Do we know if we are able to use ESSER funding to purchase additional rapid tests?
President Sandoval, Mrs. Underhill, members of the governing board, that would be an eligible expenditure, yes.
That's great. And then another question I had was, well, first of all, I was curious. I know that one of the requests of data I submitted was around vaccination rates within our district. Were we able to identify kind of where we're at as a district as far as that goes?
Mr. Sandoval, Ms. Hill, yes, certainly we've identified that information even by zip code and by school. We'll provide it to you for the full page in the Friday report for you. But just to give you some information, general information, our schools run, if I look at the list here, the highest percentage of vaccinations at any one zip code is probably right around 60%. Lowest is probably right around 37%. It does have the information broken down by age groups, 0 to 14, 15 to 24, and there is some information on that, which would be our students. Those run in general, 0 to 14, probably in the 4 to 6 range, 4 to 7 range in terms of percentage of students who are vaccinated in the 0 to 14. 15 to 24 is a little bit higher, well, is higher as probably between the 30s and the 40%. As we move into our staff, we get into higher numbers, probably 30s to 60s, depending upon the age level that's in there. We can post this information. It's available on the county website, but certainly we'll provide it to you in the Friday report tomorrow.
Great, thank you for that. And just in relation to that, I was just wondering if we anticipate continuing to offer vaccination clinics in partnership with the county, or whoever's partnering with us on those?
President Sandoval, Mrs. Hill, thank you for that question. We did host the one pod that was for our staff specifically through the county. The county had approached us and asked us to partner with the city on that. We have not been approached for any additional vaccination clinics at this time. If I could, I did just want to add just a side note for our community, if they're not aware, that the data that Mr. Moss presented is, of course, the community data that he was able to compile. That is not data. We do not ask our students or our family or our staff to disclose their vaccination to us.
Great, thank you. Another question I had kind of goes back into, as I know as a teacher myself, that when I see my attendance and I see students marked absent for different things, the codes are different, and I know Mr. Moss had mentioned that this year. So I know that people are sometimes frustrated when, and this, I'm in a different district, so don't get me wrong, but I'm assuming the codes are across the state or whatever. I think that, you know, one thing where we might be able to kind of maybe hasten or work our teachers getting in contact with families, et cetera, and I see it in the plan that principals will inform teachers of students who are quarantined, is that I know from my standpoint, what I saw last year on attendance was much different than what I'm seeing this year. So I don't know if a kid is ill or out or quarantine or what. So I think if we can clarify that, like you've mentioned in your plan, then we can much more quickly address the needs of those students that are quarantined, because we'll know how long they're out for. Is that, would you agree? Okay, that's great. Let's see. Another question I had is just, you mentioned about mitigation around extracurricular activities, et cetera. Are we kind of working with our schools to ensure that they're informing us of events as they're happening and those kinds of things, so we don't have, you know, a super spreader or something that we didn't know about coming up?
Sure. President Sandoval and Ms. Underhill, as you've seen there, we're going to be working with our school leaders on developing that safety plan when events are planned. There are some things that are already in place, such as athletics and those type of activities, and I know certainly knowing over the last few weeks with Meet the Teacher Nights, curriculum nights that have happened, some of our schools, as you heard already, are having, you know, different PTSA events. So certainly we are made aware of those, but I also believe that our principals are very much aware of the need to mitigate the virus and are working hard to ensure that we don't have those super spreader events.
Great, that's great. No, that's good. Let's see. Just trying to look at my questions here. I noticed also, I was excited to hear that our high schools at least are going with the one-to-one with the computers. So I'm assuming that that also will be an enhancement to our strategy for those students that have to be quarantined. And once we kind of clarify our expectations for our teachers around what, you know, how we're posting, et cetera, that would be a significant help as well. Is that correct? Is that across high schools, or is it just at the high schools?
Ms. Underhill, it's an awesome question. It's one that I think we have to continue to refine the answer I may give tonight, because I know that many of our high schools are excited and looking forward to being a one-to-one computerized environment. But I couldn't say to you tonight that every high school has the needed technology to become a one-to-one, instructional type of environment for our students yet. So, but what I do know, and Dr. Bell spoke to it, dusting off our methodology for distribution of computers is happening. And I know that our high school principals and their teams are taking inventory and doing their best to ensure that if there is a time for a student that needs to have instruction via the computer and needs a computer, or even a hotspot for that matter, like last year, we would certainly give them access. I do know that at least one of our high schools, though, I do believe is nearing that one-to-one perspective, and they're very excited to be in that spot. I just don't know if every high school is there yet.
Got it. Okay. That makes
Dr. Davidson?
Mr. Gay.
If I could interject, we are extraordinarily close to one-to-one at every single high school. The only reason I'm saying that we're not 100% there is that we've had a number of devices come back for repair and things of that nature, and we are repairing and replacing those and plugging those holes very, very quickly. So I'm confident that every student that needs a device will have one at the high school level, and we're working to get very close at the elementary level as well, although we have further to go there.
Great.
Mrs. Underhill, if I could just jump in quickly, because I do want to clarify. we are talking about two different things. And so when you say to, within a school or a group of teachers, the one-to-one model, that's an instructional model that we are working towards to make sure that we're utilizing technology in the classrooms and enhancing learning every single day. What we're talking about is the opportunity to make sure every student has access to a computer. And so that's where you get some of the different high schools in different spots and where the teacher training is and those kinds of things. So I just want to clarify, you know, when you hear one-to-one, that is an instructional model. We're working to make sure that our students have access to that technology, and then we'll continue to train and provide professional development, all of those types of things as we work to continue to encourage technology in the classroom each and every day.
That's great, and I appreciate that clarification. It just does seem like if we move that way, we would be much more seamless. So, I mean, you know, for a lot of reasons. So I think that's great, and I appreciate that. The other thing I wanted to bring up was just, you know, obviously the absences and the substitute fill rate. As a teacher, I know that that's challenging. And, you know, I know we've talked about, we've increased our substitute pay rate, and we've, you know, are anticipating bringing back pay coverage, et cetera. I just wanted to see were there other thoughts around how do we, one, recruit substitutes or, you know, that kind of thing, and how do we make sure that we are able to sustain our workforce during these challenging times, which is critical for maintaining quality in the classroom.
Thank you, Ms. Underhill. President Sandoval, may I ask if Ms. Vesely has any ideas? I'm not certain where human resources have been working over the last few weeks, so I'd certainly invite her up or speak from the side.
Good evening. Thank you. We have been working with ESI, and we are putting blast out, what we call a blast out daily. So when we have a school that's in need, we will try to either get long-term subs that are needed for those classrooms, as well as constantly putting out, hey, we've got some open positions in 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade. And we are still looking at trying to recruit right now. We have started moving towards our student teachers who are in our district. There is a certification through the Arizona Department of Education that allows us to take student teachers and put them on a student teacher intern cert. There are a couple of universities that allow us to do that. NAU and Grand Canyon are two of them that we're working with. So we have started reaching out to our student teachers, sending them out for interviews to our sites that still have some openings, and trying to move them into those positions, getting them on a teacher contract, and then working specifically with those specific teachers in that grade level. So we have been successful. We've moved, I want to say, 2 or 3 student teachers into some classrooms. There are a couple that felt that they needed to go that traditional route of student teaching, which we fully understand. And so it really is that choice. We have also continued to reach out with ESI, and again, just trying to look for any kind of teachers. We did get one coming in from Mexico through the J1 visa program as well, and that's a new program that ESI has started with us this year. So we continue. I think we struggle. I know our teachers are looking for that support as well. We are continuing to reach out, and we are reaching out to the universities to see what other supports, and then we're also looking forward to our December graduates.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so I don't really have any other questions, but I just do have some comments, but I don't want to, if there's other questions, I can move on. Okay.
No, please.
I guess I don't want to go without addressing those of you that have come in support of a mask mandate and the many, many people that we've heard from in the community. I want to thank again our staff for doing everything that they could to, you know, build up our mitigation plan. But I just kind of want to talk about where we are and kind of how I feel like how we got here. You know, our state leadership passed a law against 2 proven COVID mitigation strategies that are now directly affecting our youngest learners who are not eligible for vaccines. Further, some of our leaders successfully encouraged the governor to withhold federal COVID relief funding If local school boards put mitigation strategies deemed effective by the broad recognized medical community, our state universities, and our own state health department into practice. With transmission rising and a more contagious variant, we now find ourselves between a rock and a hard place. We cannot mandate proven effective mitigation strategies without breaking the law. If we break the law, we lose federal COVID relief funding that is critical to implementing our other relief and mitigation strategies, such as pay for substitutes, staff coverage, facility maintenance, cleaning costs, additional online learning equipment and personnel, and educational support to make up for last year's learning loss. For those of you frustrated by this situation, I am too. And while I believe that mandating vaccines for those eligible and that are now FDA approved, and that indoor masking would be extremely helpful at this point, we have not had a strong recommendation for our administration or our staff to move this direction, and nor does it seem likely that it would be passed by this board. A mandated mask mandate would likely trigger only additional turmoil for our staff during an already stressful year. Teachers and staff should not have to be the police on these things, nor should they be subject to additional challenges from parents and community members. It's just not fair. And because transmission and continuing absences for both staff and students, we are in even more need of federal COVID funding to continue opportunities, be they in person or potentially online, as we continue through this pandemic. At this point, I'm just urging us all to be our best, kind of like Olivia said, as a community, if we want in-person classes, performances, social events, and sporting events to happen for our kids. And more importantly, if we want to slow the spread in the rest of the community and save lives. Consistent masking and vaccination are taken into consideration by the county and the AIA when determining quarantine protocols. If we want to keep our kids in school and programs afloat, why wouldn't we do this and do it willingly? Social distancing, hand hygiene, quarantine, enhanced cleaning, staying at home when sick are critical to everyone. With our hands tied in other ways, we need to put our best foot forward in implementing and holding ourselves accountable to all these mitigation strategies we can require and to implement both as a district and as individuals for our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Underhill. Representative Pingerelli, may I just, piggyback on one question that Ms. Underhill had. It was, there's actually a couple, but I'll just focus on one, and then Representative Pingerelli, I'll hand it over to you. But we talked about retention, right? And certainly making sure that, we continue to do all that we can to show that our teachers, staff, leadership feel valued, right? And this is pre-COVID, but we are in a situation where with the number of absences and the amount of continued extra efforts that our teachers continue to fulfill by, covering, classrooms, that even as they cover, their lunch hours, et cetera. And even that, at times that becomes, an issue of safety, right? I mean, where they may have multiple individuals in the lunchroom at a time. I mean, there are times where, someone has to cover, it might be leadership that has to cover a class. And so that, lessens the numbers, in a scenario where we have a lot of students in it at one place at one time. That said, one of the things that we talked about last year was, I think it was called a hazard pay, so I don't want to use that term, but I definitely want to make sure that we're thinking about, and Ms. Festley, maybe this is a, maybe a comment that I would like you to hear is, I want to make sure that we're thinking about how we're going to continue to show all of our employee groups how much we value them. And I would certainly support and recommend, as we take a look at ways that we can do that. One way is certainly, I'm going to call it a supplemental pay, and Ms. Myers, you're probably going to kick me after the meeting, but maybe that's not the right term. But whatever we can do from a financial perspective, I think that's one way we can certainly continue to show that we value those individuals who make us look good. And it's all those people on the front line. So just something to make sure that we're keeping top of mind. Okay. Representative Pingerelli, thank you.
Sure, I'm last. Let's see, the first question, it looks like Ms. Hill and President Sandoval, you were looking at my notes because you asked the questions on, I was looking at teacher absences. So I had wanted to know if the numbers we're seeing is from just COVID cases, but it is not, it's everything. And then I was going to ask exactly what you'd ask, is what we look like exactly a year ago today in terms of absences for teachers. But I guess for Dr. Davidson, you've been doing this for a number of years. Give me your best shot on a weekly basis. How many teachers are out sick? I know that goes up and down, but is it in the teens? Is it?
President Sandoval and Ms. Pingarelli, there is certainly trend data. You are correct, and I'm really nervous to speak off the cuff. Honestly, I'd love to be able to pull that data. We have that data available, but certainly I would say from you on a good day, I mean, a good day is 0, of course, and that you know, there's certain times of the year when you can guarantee that's going to happen. But I know just in general, you know, if you're looking at 80 absences, 85, that would be seen as probably a good day because that's very close to a fill rate that's manageable. But there has been times, and Ms. Vesley and the team can speak to that this year, where you're seeing into the 160s, the 170s. So the need for substitute teachers. That doesn't also include those jobs that don't put in for a substitute. There are certain roles that we have that still put in for an absence but don't need a sub. So that doesn't always tell the whole picture of what's happening on a campus. And Ms. Pingarelli, I would just add too, when you think of, you know, a campus level, that also doesn't include those support staff members that aren't present, you know, our classified team. And we know they play a tremendous role in making certain that our schools are safe and running well too. So please recognize when we talk about this particular data set, it is really just those certified teachers.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. And then I know a couple of board meetings ago, we had approved teacher pay for teachers that were out with COVID for up to 14 days. So I know you have these teacher absences due to illness. You don't know, but you do keep track of who is calling in and using that benefit. Well, I guess if you call it a benefit.
Certainly, Mr. Sandoval, Ms. Pingarelli. I know that Ms. Vesley and Ms. Davis, as part of the HR team, certainly are working with those employees who might be eligible for that addition, those resources, essentially, that reimbursement of days. I don't know if Ms. Vesley has a number by chance you could share, or how that process is going.
No, I mean, I don't need to know how many. I know, I mean, you do keep track of who's out with COVID because, you know, they are able to use that resource to get up to 14 days off.
Yes, ma'am. Certainly, yes.
And I agree with it. I voted for it. The second thing is on the isolation and quarantine slide, where it gives the Maricopa County Department of Public Health effective immediately, the MCDPH will now review cases, quarantine, and provide schools a letter for close contacts for each school day. So I know before we were doing that, I felt. So does that mean that they're getting the positive cases, they're doing the interviews, they're talking to the students, they're talking to the parents, they're getting our seating charts of where the students are, of where they're sitting in the cafeteria. They're doing all that hands-on work and then telling us which students need to be quarantined because they were around positive cases.
President Sandoval, Ms. Pingarelli, I'll probably ask Ms. Arey to speak slightly to that, and then I'll fill in the gaps, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
President Sandoval, Mrs. Pingarelli, the cases are submitted either directly to the county or they're submitted to the school principal, who then submits them. So our principals are still working with the staff member who may not be well or the student on if there was any exposure. However, the county is the one making the determination that because of that exposure, there is a required quarantine.
Okay, thank you. Well, I know there's been a lot of I mean, you heard even tonight, confusion on who has the authority for the quarantining students. You know, I've asked the Ledge Council to give me an opinion on who has the authority, just to make sure it is the Maricopa County Department of Health. And then also to give an opinion on having students be able to come back that are vaccinated versus not. So I'll let you know what I hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Pingarelli. Ms. Airy. So the tests, each site at this point gets 20, is that right?
President Sandoval, it's around 20 to 24 tests per site.
Okay. And if, I guess my question is, and I'm sure the answer is yes, but if a site has a higher need, I mean, can we move tests around the district to make sure that those sites are being taken care of if the demand is higher at another site?
President Sandoval, absolutely. Our lead nurse, Lisa Alexander, will be overseeing that process and accounting for all of those tests. So she'll be the one putting together the process and the allocation and working with the schools if there's a particular concern or we need to allocate resources elsewhere.
Okay, perfect. I don't know if this was Mr. Moss or Dr. Davidson around the students that are on a waiting list currently, wanting to move into the virtual environment. How, and I apologize, and you may have answered this question when you were speaking, but can you just walk me through how we're processing those students and what the, I guess the turnaround time is, you know, for that 54, or those 54 young scholars to be learning in that virtual environment?
President Sandoval and members of the board, certainly we'll process them as soon as we have opportunities. Right now, our class sizes are full. By grade level, I would tell you they're probably, I don't have them with me, but they are certainly bigger than what we would have in a face-to-face classroom, which is typical of any kind of virtual instruction. So we are not processing them at all. They are on a waiting list, and they are waiting. They're essentially attending face-to-face classes. As we get teachers who will work in the virtual environment, we will move them as quickly as we possibly can to, well, and probably will offer to the parent, would you like to stay for their 9 weeks? Would you like to go now? We'll ask each student if they want to move. Some may not, and then we'll move them as quickly as we can, as soon as we can find the staff members to take the positions.
Gotcha.
President Sandoval, if I could just jump in quick.
Yeah.
So we've explored several models on how we can best accommodate the students who would like to move into that virtual piece. And right now, what we've settled on is really doing a kind of a full court press. So Ms. Hunter-Hill, you asked earlier, are we out there recruiting and trying to find substitutes? We're trying to find full-time, right, online teachers as well. So anyone who can hear this and would like to get their CDL and drive buses, or anyone who would like to get their sub-certificate or their emergency certificate to come in and help us in the classroom, that's where we're focusing our energy right now so that we can expand our online learning program.
No, thank you for that. And I think for me, you know, as we listen to the community speak this evening, you know, the social and emotional aspect of what our students are going through, including our staff, our associates, is just, I just can't imagine, right, what they're going through. So the waiting list, I mean, if we have a student that who's on a waiting list and their option, and please correct me if I'm wrong if I misspeak at all, if their option to continue learning is only in a face-to-face environment at this point, although there is some level of angst, I believe one of our community members stated that, you know, if a student is not prepared to learn, and if there is some anxiety, you know, taking place due to, in this case, masks, right, and they wish to not go into that face-to-face environment on campus. What's our solution for those students?
President Sandoval, I would encourage any family who's in that situation where they're feeling that level of anxiety, that they would reach out to Dr. Bell's office or my office, and we'll get them connected with some supports to be able to do everything we can to meet their needs.
Okay. Is that a communication that, I don't know if that's something that we want to go ahead and, send to those 54. I realize that might open up, a floodgate that we may not be able to handle due to capacity at this point. But I just want to make sure that those parents fully understand that everything that we do on a daily basis as a district is all focused on their child, their young scholar, right? And I just want them to understand that we are by their side. And if they do have concerns and want to move into that environment in a expedited way, that they know that we're there to support that.
We'll do everything we can.
Thank you. Technology, laptops, Mr. Gay. Ms. Underhill asked about the one-to-one ratios. Now, I know our technology, there may be some of our laptops might not be the latest and greatest, right? And their ability to hold a charge is, probably minimal. So, what's our solution on sites to make sure that, do we have charging stations, I guess is my question. What are the thoughts around making sure that our laptops, well in a student's hand, that they're working?
Thank you, Mr. Sandoval. A couple of points to answer that question. We have laptop carts, which are charging stations. And we actually have a requisition for quite a few more, just to make sure we have plenty of them to go around. Of course, when the device is in the cart, it's not being used. And so there is that challenge. We're looking at a lot of different technologies that offer charging solutions that let the student continue to use the device while it's being charged. They're pretty expensive and they're very limited at this point. So we continue to look for those. Now, we're also, at the same time, doing the very simple but kind of expensive process of replacing batteries. And so on our older devices, particularly ones that get to be about the 5 years in age point, those batteries start failing. And so we've set aside budget to make sure that we can replace those. In fact, I mentioned earlier about the ones that have come in for repair. I would say the majority that come in for repair just need a new battery. And so we've been replacing those as fast as we can as well.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. Now, what about, do we still have hotspots available? And here's why I'm asking. When we talk about our most vulnerable students, in this case, and more specifically, our McKinney-Vento foster kids who, may not have that internet access at home, do we still have available hotspots for those families, those students who may need that assistance?
Mr. Sandoval, yes, we have plenty of them.
Okay.
All they have to do is ask.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you for that. Dr. Davidson, on slide 11, Mr. Moss, thank you, sir. I'm going to paraphrase. You talked about requiring a safety plan and that there is parent involvement. Now, that requirement of a safety plan for incorporating mitigation strategies at indoor events, I'm assuming that's at each site is to require a safety plan. Is that what that bullet is saying?
Correct, and we'll be working with our team, Mr. Sandoval, to put a basic template together that would be used to ensure that our team is thinking about the mitigation strategies that were described tonight as they plan for those events, and that could be for just a variety of events that may be held on campus.
Okay. No, thank you for that. I appreciate that. So I guess one of the final things I'd like to say is this, and it'll lead into a question for you, Ms. Ari, but it's a community member mentioned, my question at our last, I think it was our study session, right, a week ago today. And just around, are we doing everything we can, right, to make sure that everybody, all of our students, families, associates are, in a safe and supportive I guess, scenario as they walk through the halls of PUSD, right? I mean, for me, one of the things I said, it's not just about masks or air purifiers or, the cleansing station. It's about all of it, right? And how we leverage those mitigation strategies to ensure the health and wellness of all of those that we are responsible for. As we move forward, in this environment of, what you presented today, right? I mean, there's a lot that we also have to lean on the district for. You guys are on the calls every day and in the trenches with our teachers, and that's going to lead to another question, how we're really including our teachers and staff in the conversation as we develop plans, for our district. I mean, one of the things that we entered into the winter semester with last year was, making site-by-site decisions, right? But, as we look at, and here we are again, right, with, individuals getting sick, and how are we engaging our teachers and staff in those conversations around ensuring that our mitigation strategies are keeping, and not just keeping people safe, but make sure people feel safe, as they're walking our campuses.
So, President, and I know you said Ms. Airy, but I'll start.
Well, I think my question for Ms. Airy is going to lead into just the communications, but I guess for me, it's how are we including students and teachers, right, in the conversation? Because, again, the students have a big stake, a major stake in their education. And I know we have all the touch points from the superintendent's roundtable to, the opportunities here at the board meetings, et cetera. But how have those conversations gone, I guess is my question. I know we have the opportunities, but what's the feedback been from our student population?
Mr. Sandoval, and I would tell you that's a good question. I would tell you that not serving at a campus right now, I don't have that exact feedback from our students, but what I do know is many of us spend many hours a day working alongside our principals through this COVID process, and we certainly know that they are engaging their teams. And I know that our teachers out there that are experiencing this certainly have a voice and an opinion. Likely that's at the campus level unless they choose to share that with us. But I do know that our leaders are hearing from their team and working alongside them to go through all of these things that we shared tonight. But I don't know if there's one specific avenue that's capturing the voice of the student per your question.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think, for me, and I've said it before, I mean, one of the ways to continue to build on those relationships and build trust and trusting teams, really, and even consensus, right, is making sure that, we include, those individuals whose decisions that are made, whose lives, I should say, are impacted, right, by the decisions that are made, from the district office at this table. So I want to make sure that we continue to really prioritize and uplift the voices of our students, teachers, and staff as we make those decisions. With that said, Ms. Airy, as we take a look at how we're moving forward as a district, as it relates to our mitigation strategies, and I believe that there is and you may already have a plan, so I guess I'll just ask the question. I just believe that we need to make sure that our communications is clear, it's transparent and frequent to, all the individuals, all of our stakeholders, right? Certainly families, but certainly our teachers as well, and our staff, to understand what they should be expecting, right, when they go onto campus, and what's that expectation, what they should be expecting to even do and execute on based on, the strategies that the district has is handing down, if you will. So I guess the question is around the communication strategy to all of those individuals.
President Sandoval, just to make sure I'm understanding you correctly, how we're communicating this plan to our teachers?
Communicating the plan, and also, what the frequency is of that communication, right? I think on a daily basis, I mean, as the science changes, right, we've always done a really good job as a district to adapt. Mm-hmm. And it's continuing to change and adapt every day, right? If it's not the science, it's changing. I'm sure there's something going on at the district that, I think our families, students, teachers, and staff would certainly appreciate a understanding, on a frequent basis. And I don't know what that scenario is, but I just want to make sure that we are sensitive to the importance of ensuring that we have a very transparent and frequent communication strategy as we go through this together, right? Because we're a large district.
President Sandoval, we have a number of consistent and clear communication channels that we share with all employees from the first day when they join our district. They receive weekly communications from us through our Peoria Insider. In addition, we share any updates as they become available. We have communication that comes out periodically through Dr. Reynolds. He produces videos. So we have a robust plan in place. And then, of course, as there are changes or updates, we may send separate communications. We always reach out to our administrators first before we proceed through those channels.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. And again, it's just, I think it's just worth mentioning, in light of the, I guess, this global pandemic that we are still in the middle of. So I appreciate that. Last question, I'm not sure if anybody can speak to our SEL team, but many of our community members this evening again, spoke to the social and emotional health, of our students, and again, our associates as well. But how are those teams, how are they doing? I mean, I'm assuming we've got the hotline, which one of our members spoke about. How's the queue? Is it full? And how are we handling the overflow? And how are social workers doing? Are they handling the demand that's most likely taking place today? I mean, just how is that team doing?
Sure, President Sandoval, that is a big, giant question. You referenced some things earlier that I would add to the answer, which is, in Ms. Underhill serving as a teacher, you understand this, teaching right now, learning, being a site administrator, it's a very complicated, difficult time right now on our campuses. And so those individuals that you mentioned, whether it's a social worker, a behavior interventionist, anybody who might be supporting behavioral and social needs of students, they're working just as equally as hard to keep everything moving forward in a positive direction. So in terms of the hotline, I have not heard from the individuals who currently manage that for us, that there's some type of overflow or some type of a situation that they're not able to address. But I do know that our social worker group and all of our individuals out there at the sites are working alongside our parents to make sure that our kids can be successful. So that was kind of a global answer, but on behalf of our SEL team as a unit, support for students is first and foremost, and that's what they do.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I guess all I can ask, after that response, and thank you, Dr. Reynolds and team, is, one of the things that I've continued to applaud the district for being are compassionate leaders, courageous leaders, individuals who understand people and continue to prioritize, the health and wellness and success of all of our students, teachers, and staff. So I do appreciate your leadership and those qualities and characteristics, so thank you for that. Board members, further questions, comments? Michelle? No? Good.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Moss, thank you. Ms. Airy, thank you. Dr. Reynolds, thank you, sir. Moving on to 13.2, Student Achievement Review. Dr. Bell?
I believe that's me.
I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Moss.
Thank you. President Sandoval, members of the board, I'm glad to be standing here today to talk to you about really what's the most important thing for us and why we're in the business, and that's about student achievement and student learning, and talk to you a little bit about the things that are important in this process, and that, well, I'll take over. And give you some information, and I deal with things in data in particular where I want data to be valid, and we're going to talk about a little bit about how difficult it's going to be to compare some data from this year to previous years to whatever's there. And again, not that we're trying to dismiss it, but again, keep in mind the context in which it was developed so that we can make some positive statements and make some changes to move students forward. So we're going to share some proficiency data, some median student growth percentiles for our elementary students. Certainly we'll talk about the high schools, which are in a transition period at this point in time, and then talk about what we're really doing with schools and what our plan and how we move things forward to say, you know, we're going to be in school 180 days, things are going to be wonderful and everything's going to be great, and now how we're making some adjustments to some of that as it goes through. So we'll start out, and I talked about the assessment challenges, and again, the biggest challenge, and we're all aware of this, is COVID and how COVID impacted this testing in the last couple of years. First of all, you can know that they canceled all testing in 2020. In 2021, we did not take a science test. They took the science test off and did not offer it. They only offered a field test, and they shortened it by half of its original length. So it was just a test of questions, really, in that portion. We certainly had some difficulties in getting students to come back and take the test. Our testing percentages went from the 95, 96, 98% level down to around the 90% level because we had difficulty getting students to come and take the test. And also, I think the 2 years off and certainly all the things that students dealt with throughout the year really impacted their commitment to do their best to the test. And I think that was not just with us. And again, I don't say that this is a Peoria issue. I think this is a statewide issue. And certainly when you see some of the scores as they declined, I think you'll be visibly, it'll be positive to what's there. And I think it's the last thing I would say about this is I think that this is not, some of these things we're going to talk about are not unexpected. You know, I think that we went into last year saying we're going to do as best we can, do the best we can, do the best we can, but it was not going to be equal to what it was in the past. And so certainly these numbers are not unexpected when you get to look through them. So the first document I have for you here, and I'm going to kind of go through here, and I played this little game with the mouse. Look at that. You can actually see what it says now, but I want to show you and tell you what this is. These are AZ Merit third grade scores, right? And each of those numbers in a box represents a percentage of students at that grade level, okay? And as you're aware, we use four different distinctions. That MP means those students who are minimally proficient. The PP are students who are partially proficient. The P stands for proficient, and the HP stands for highly proficient. Okay, when we talk or we look and we try to compare some of these this information, is what we really look at is we compare the total number between the proficient and the highly proficient. For example, in this case, the passing rate, the number of students who met the requirements or met the grade level standard, would be the 32 plus the 14. In that case, it would be 46. And you can see how the numbers have changed from the state level 25 to 10. These negatives, or these red numbers, as you see across here, are the comparison of the passing rate from 2019 to the passing rate to 2021. So in third grade here in elementary language arts, the passing rate was 46%. On a statewide basis, you see that it's only 35%. So we had an 11% decline in students meeting the standard at that grade level. And if you go across, you can see how those numbers went down on a statewide basis. Down below is our district numbers. And again, we've shared individual school data with each of the schools so that they can look at their individual schools, but this is on a district basis all the way across all third grade students. So this is essentially, we've gone from a 49% passing rate in 2019 to a 40% passing rate in 2021. We had a decline then of 9% across each of those. And as you look across there, you can see that in some cases we did okay. Some cases we did better than the state. In other cases, you can see that we were not as successful as some of the other districts or other students around the state. I'll move on. This is the same information for math. Notice the numbers are significantly bigger than they were in ELA The numbers are now we're in the 13s and 14s as declines as opposed to the 6s and the 7s. And so as you see that again, as math builds one upon each other, you can know that if you missed the instruction from the previous year, it's going to impact you more the next year because it's so built one step on each other as it goes through. And so these are the scores you can compare. Again, we're better in some cases. We seem to struggle in 6th grade at both on both math and ELA, and we're having conversations about what is that something we didn't do, something we did do, what are we having there? We're having certainly lots of conversation about how these numbers got to be. And again, principals have their own individual school grade levels where they're working with their individual teachers to move through this process with them to determine how they can improve at their own individual level. The second piece to this, these are different numbers. This is median student growth percentiles. And the second largest, this is actually the largest part of the A through F labels that we're going to begin to use again for next year, and that is growth is 50% of all of our A through F labels for our schools. And so growth is really a measure of how well each student does compared to their peers. And so what you do is you take each student, you get a score for each student, and then you find the median for the whole group, because that talks about how far the whole group moved, and you do that in comparison to each peer group. And so the high students are compared only to the high students, the lower students compared only to the lower students, and you get then scores for each of those, and you get the median across each group. If you take a look, you see that the state, on the numbers, you see 50, because 50 would be essentially equal to, and kind of in this case, we take a look and basically say between 45 and 55 is really what we consider to be 1 year's growth, or in that case, keeping up with your peers. You're learning as much as your peers as you move forward. And so as you move from year to year, you can see in the past we have been reasonably successful at keeping our groups, in most cases, above that 50% level in terms of moving forward our students farther and farther, a little bit or equal to what's happening across the state. I'm going to call your attention to 4th grade here, because in 4th grade you notice that there's no numbers. That's because when we were, those 4th graders, in order to get a median student growth percentile, you have to have a previous test to measure your growth from. These students, because we didn't give a test in 2020, did not take the test in 3rd grade, and they were in 2nd grade 2 years ago, and consequently did not have a test in 2nd grade, didn't take one in 3rd. Consequently, we have no growth scores for 4th grade for this year. We'll get them back again in 22 when we move forward. Okay? On this page, I want to give you what these numbers are. This 53, again, is the median student growth percentile for 4th grade. This 717 is the number of students, again, number of students that had a growth score less than 33. In our vernacular, those students fell behind. They did not keep up with their peers. We have 775 students between 33 and 66, very close to one standard deviation above, higher or lower than the mean, which would be 50. And so that's the number of students we would say are pretty much equal to where they were. And obviously the student at 34 or 35 is not the same as a student at 65. Okay? Those at 66 or above, that's 833 students who scored above 66 as their median student growth percentile. In our opinion, they essentially advanced farther than their peers and moved quicker up their knowledge base as they moved through each of the processes. And again, the PR there is the passing rate for that group of students who falls within the median student growth percentile calculation. It may be different than the overall passing rate for the school, because not all students have a median student growth percentile. If I moved in from California, for example, I may take the test one time. I don't have a student growth percentile because I'm waiting for the second test to be compared to in that process. So not every student is included, whereas in the proficiency rates, every student is included in those numbers. Okay, you can see in here, these are our scores down here for 2021. Median student growth percentiles all are equal to or above what we would consider to be 50 as the middle of what we're accomplishing, while the passing rates are, again, as we talked about, not as high. And we make the distinction then that we probably had some students that that didn't fall as far as some of our other districts who may not have been in school face-to-face for as long as we were last year. Okay? I'm going to move forward, and I'm sure you're getting lots of questions as this goes along, and I can answer them as we can go back through the slides. In fact, this is the math. Notice the math numbers are significantly higher, 57, 60, 62, 64 in the math in terms of growth percentiles. Again, we moved our students. We had some growth. We did pretty well. You can see, again, take the same information, right? And again, we had growth increases in those grade levels all the way across, higher than what we would consider to be 1 year's growth. You want to ask now or you want to ask later? Yeah?
Okay, sorry. I was just curious. So I'm seeing like our proficiency, obviously going down, but our growth continuing. Was there a certain year within which our state standards changed significantly within this time period, or no?
No, I
Or our
don't think
tests?
there's. No, well, there has been a change in. No. Well, let me see. AZ Merit would have been 3 years, so probably 17. They probably had a test change in 17.
Okay.
17 to 18.
Thank you.
Mr. Moss?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you just explain, like in, let's see, grade 5, what for PR, what the 34 means?
That would mean that 34% of the students who have a growth score achieved also the proficiency score. So they were in that proficient or highly proficient category that we talked about in the previous thing. And so the question everybody's going to have, and I already know the question is going to come up, is how do our proficiency scores go down and our growth scores go up, correct? And that gets to the point that we did not, in some cases, in most cases, we did not fall as far as everyone else did. So our students actually grew more than their peers, but they did not grow enough to reach the proficiency level of that grade level. Okay, and so that's what give us higher growth scores but lower proficiency scores, which is where we see some of the information. It also, I think, and we're working on gathering some information to prove this, but I'm confident that what we're going to find is that what we really have is a wider range of student scores, that we're going to have some students who did really, really well, either in person or online, and we're going to have some students who did not very well for a variety of reasons in face-to-face or in online. Either they were not interested, they couldn't do it, and even in schools, they could have been quarantined 4 or 5 times, whatever the case may be, but you're going to have students, and so, in the past, we've talked about this idea that we were very good at moving students, and I'll give you an example, 50, 46, 51, 57 students moved kind of as a group from here to here to here to here. And now, is because of COVID and all the different things that happened to us, our group kind of went from here to here, and some really moved and did well, and others didn't do so well, and now you have a wider range of students who's walking into the teacher's classroom. And so we've talked about that with the teachers, we've talked about with the principals, and we'll talk about some of the things that we've done to try to mitigate that, but what you really have is a wider range of students. Some were more successful than others, and that's why we get these numbers that are a little bit, don't seem to add up in what you're getting to. Okay? On the high school level, things are really changing. This is the first year that we have given this particular test, AZM2 for high schools. In the past, in 2019, we actually gave 6 different tests. We gave an Algebra 1 test, a Geometry test, an Algebra 2 test, and an ELA 9 test, and an ELA 10 test, and an ELA 11 test. Those were all taken away. For 2020, we were supposed to have just one single ELA 10, one single Math 10, and because they canceled in 20, this is the only data that we have that actually matches with what's there. You can see that we were above the state average in both of those tests, comparing the 33, and again, the same measure, minimally proficient, partially proficient. This is the passing rate. So that would be 33 here. Our passing rate would have been 34. Here we have a passing rate of 26 and ours was 31. So we actually did better than the state in both the math and the ELA test. But in fact, being able to do any kind of growth score or any kind of comparison to how we did the previous year, there's no data to do any comparison with. Okay? And so when we talk about that, what we've been able to do and what we really started to do is we've really been focusing with our principals, not on these scores, but we've been focusing with our principals on our ACT scores. And we have been participating for the last 13 years in both a 10-year grant that we received through the Helios Foundation, where we gave every student an ACT test, every junior an ACT test. The last few years we participated in the menu of assessments, and we've given every one of our juniors, to some degree, the best we could, an ACT test. And then we've looked at this test then becoming our test of record, and for our labels, the ACT will become our test for this current year for all of our high schools. And so we do have some past information. These are some of the scores as we looked at, and basically, again, the same four calculations, but this will be our passing rates for the ACT, what the state would consider to be the passing rates for the ACT. For the math score, they actually combine the reading and the English into a single score, and that's our passing rates. And again, a science test that gives us that information along that line. As you look at some of that data, you can see that we probably, looks like we had a pretty good year in 2020, but I would caution you that there are some significant numbers of students who did not take the test in 2020 and 2021. And I'll just use an example. Probably in 17 through 19, we averaged about 2,800 to 2,850 students who took the test. That number of 2020 was only about 1,600 kids who took the test because they were seniors. They took it in October of their senior year, not in their junior year. And some of them, because the colleges were de-emphasizing it for college admission, decided that it wasn't necessary for them to really do it, and consequently we had less students who really showed up to take the test. 2021 is our juniors from this year, and again, that number is back to about 2,300, again, because of the online impact of students being able to be there and having them come back to take the test. And so while we're looking at the numbers we're really talking to our principals about are 17, 18, and 19 as really their guidelines for what they're trying to plan for, what they're trying to improve to, what they're trying to, I hate to use the word catch up, but what they're trying to get the students to reach their potential, which we would use mostly as those numbers in 17, 18, and 19 as opposed to 19 or 20 and 21.
President Sandoval, I just had a question on this one.
No problem.
So looking at 19, I guess, why do you see the jump? If 2019, we were pretty much online the last few months, I guess why are we having a jump in the numbers for both math, reading, and science?
The numbers in 19 are actually the last year that we were full-time in person.
Okay.
Right? So that was the last one that we were full-time in person. 2020 would be our juniors that took it as a senior. So they were the ones who were online in that process there. So that's why we think they were there. In addition, it became, and I'll use Dr. Sorensen, that was one of his, a lot of schools have begun to push that, and we knew that it was going to be coming, and so they started pushing that as really the measure of success in the A through F. And I think that's the best year as we go through there in terms of how we're trying to accomplish, and we got to get back to that, I think, is what we're working on.
Thank you.
I was just curious, so when we look at the passing rate, how do those correlate to like the score? Kids are all about what their score was, whatever.
So the passing rate correlates to the score in terms of, in general, the ACT determines what they have, what's called a college and career ready score, okay? Example would be that number is, I believe in reading, it's 18. And they have made that, in general, that's the bottom of the passing rate. So if you were to take a look at the P, that would be the 18 in reading, right? I think it's 22 in math. I think it's 23 in science. But that essentially is the bottom of the passing proficiency rate. And then they move the highly proficient is probably 5 or 6 percentage points higher than that. And again, the ACT scores individually are out of 36, right? And so we moved through those, and they've determined that, ACT determined that for the state and gave them the numbers that says this is how you would come up with that proficiency rates for us. And so basically it says that 32% of, if we look at this 2017 in math, for example, right here, basically means that we had 32% of the students who would have been college and career ready or within a point or so of what that college and career ready because they passed and met the college and career ready standard. We also provide that information to the schools as they are using that as a barometer in terms of tracking over time, also in terms of how many kids they've been able to move forward.
I guess I was wondering, I'm curious as to why the ACT and not the SAT, since the SAT is much more commonly used for college. I realize that there is only math and English, but that's a little bit more common, and most people take the SAT to go to college. So why the ACT and not the SAT?
President Sandoval, Mr. Hill, probably I think that the tests are different types of tests, and you gave the, it is an opportunity, it was an option for schools to pick ACT or SAT. The ACT is much more information driven. In other words, it is about can you do algebra, can you do algebra 1, can you do algebra 2, can you meet those criteria of specific math or specific science or specific English ability things. The SAT is much more I don't want to use the word intelligence, but it's much more analogies and logic and thought processes related to English and math than it is specific knowledge of standards that we kind of go through. So it became much more difficult to line the SAT to state standards and say we're measuring this state standard by asking this question or this state standard by asking that question. So I think it's there. I know that there are some schools who are using it, but in general, the ACT is much more aligned to what the districts or the state standards would be, and that's one of the reasons they got approved is they were able to align it directly with the state standards.
Okay, thank you. I was just confused with why we would have chosen ACT as opposed to the SAT. So, and it's kind of sad. I mean, our percentages are abysmal. I mean, to me, I'd be shooting for 70%. 50, I'd be upset with. I'll be honest. I mean, it's abysmal to me, the numbers. So that's definitely something we have to work on. This is just a comment, and I don't know, and this is my personal belief. I think the reason that possibly, for instance, math, like you said, because they had time away from the classroom and they fell behind. And that, I think, happens over spring break. I think it happens over Christmas. I think it happens over summer. You know, so even if we got back to a more normal, my kid's homeschooled. She's really well in math, and we do Saxon math, and we go all year round. And I realize that's hard, but we don't have to actually revisit math, you know, at the start of the school year, because she had it all summer. Now, I know that's hard because kids aren't in school, but this is a suggestion, but maybe we can, you know, encourage parents to get more involved and give them something to take home to work on to keep them actively thinking about this is where you're going to be next year if you go from Algebra 1 to Algebra 2. And like I say, it's a compound. So if you're off for the whole summer, you're not thinking about math, you know, and everything you've lost. And my kids, same thing. You've only been gone for a week or two of time away, and we have to revisit a little bit. So we try really hard not to do that so we can keep moving forward. But I don't know how that's something we could implement. But I think that's where we're starting to lose kids, especially with math in particular. Math's tricky, and that compounds. So it's just a suggestion. I don't know if that's something that can be implemented to give kids something to take home over summer in particular. It's a long time to go without math. And then they're behind as soon as school starts. I'd rather move forward when school starts rather than have to go backwards. But thank you so much.
Okay, so that's kind of the data. We're going to move a little bit too, and I'm going to jump on exactly on the comment that you made there. First, we talked about this, and again, we've pushed things forward, and we've really had to think about how we're going to adjust, because in the beginning, and you talk about it, July, we had principal meetings, we had conversations. we're moving forward. This is the most important thing. You've got to get through this. It's going to be potentially a multi-year catch-up kind of process. And now we're dealing with all of the things you've heard for the last 3 hours, right? And so as we move through, we did put things in place, and I think we're going to address some of those. I mean, obviously, there's some learning opportunities, and remember we talked about the summer programming. We've done some summer programming to extend the school year. We've done some things with kindergarten, some jump starts, some tutoring, moving kids, getting them here earlier. That 8th grade Bridges program is some of the stuff we're doing, again, to get them, if you're going to start school here, if we bring in a couple weeks early, we can get you ready to go for that first day when we're ready to do some of those things. We've really pushed data. They're probably tired. The principals are probably tired of listening to me because I keep telling them this is where you have to be. This is where you have to be. This is where you have to be. We've talked about some of the other pieces that are being pushed along there. In particular, and I'm going to call it attention, we talked about small group instruction because, again, that process of the kids aren't here. I can't teach all 30 of them at once because the range isn't this big. I have to find ways of teaching to smaller groups because of the spread in terms of what's there. We're having discussions about whether that's the best way to go because I have exposure and lots of other things are coming up with that too. But we're looking at it. It's something that we think is a multi-year process. And again, we don't want to use the idea of we want kids to catch up. We don't want kids to catch up. We want kids to reach their potential of where they would have been had we not had to do this. And so it's about about moving past where they are now and how do we get to that 50 number or that 70 number as opposed to getting back to our 35 number. And I think that's the message we've been sending to principals, to teachers all the way along. And again, we've had to temper that a little bit in the last few weeks as things have become a little bit more unsettled. So I will stand, and I'm sure that Dr. Bell would add anything or. Okay, and so I'll stand for your questions.
Mr. Moss, thank you very much. Further questions, comments? Ms. Hill?
I think I mostly covered it, so thank you very much for putting this together. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. Ms. Underhill?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thanks for the presentation, and thank you for acknowledging the challenge of, trying to move into this in the situation that we're in. Because I know as a teacher, we're all concerned about that loss that's happened. But it's also extremely stressful to be, forced into, being accountable for data on, small groups of kids each week when some of those kids are gone for 2 weeks at a time. So I guess I just really appreciate that you are acknowledging that and recognizing that. I did want to talk about the PLC process just a little bit. I know that, a lot of people, if you're not in the classroom, that's just a professional learning community, and that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But I think it's a really good process when it's utilized correctly, although I would say that I haven't been the teacher for the longest time in the world, but I have not, I think there's certain training that needs to occur around that, and I know that we've offered that in our district previously, but I feel like before and I know, we need to move and we got to get going fast, but we want to make sure that our teachers, especially that are new or whatever, kind of have an understanding of that because, being data-driven is important, but if the CFAs, like common formative assessments, aren't matching up with the curriculum and, everybody's like, gotta go, we're pulling the data, it is a stressor that is on top of stressor upon top of stressor. So I guess I'm just giving you my feedback, but my big thing is that please be sure that we're getting feedback from our sites at every level about the reality of what we're trying to do. And that we're providing training and significant opportunities for them to ask questions and time to do it. So, yeah, that's my only thing. But I appreciate it. I'm glad we're moving forward. And, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Underhill. Representative Pingarelli?
No, you just mentioned that we're trying to get back to the 35%. Is that... I'm hoping that we're shooting much, much higher than that, because
President Sandoval, Ms. Pingarelli, actually what I said was we don't want to get to the 35.
Okay.
We want to get to the potential above the 35, I think is what I said. I hope I did. If not, that's what I meant.
must have, okay. Why? I'm hoping it's much, much higher than 35. Okay. Just because, I mean, we tout a 94% graduation rate. I want to make sure that we're actually graduating students that that we're way above that and that they are meeting the passing and highly proficient. So I want to make sure that they merge. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Pingarelli. Yes, Mr. Moss, I mean, there's no doubt that we've been through, and everybody's been through a lot over the last year and a half, 2 years, right? That said, you know, when we take a look about, well, one of the things I do appreciate is certainly the transparency and sharing the numbers in a very, you know, honest and real way. You know, without that honesty, you know, we can't, we won't be able to understand, you know, where we need to move next to make sure that our young scholars are put in a position to be successful. And to Ms. Pingarelli's point, you know, when they leave our walls, that, you know, they're leaving as individuals who are confident, adaptable, and certainly, you know, knowledgeable, you know, in the areas that, you know, they benefit from by going through our walls academically as well as socially. So appreciate that, but I do have a question around the data. Ms. Untitled brought up the data, and how frequently is, I would assume, you know, the numbers are spoken about at sites very frequently, but do they have immediate access to the percentages? I mean, obviously we can make comparisons, you know, just based on our own, right, versus the state levels to understand where we're at year over year. How often is the data updated? And I mean, can you just talk about their access, the site's access to the data, and just how frequently we have those conversations around where we're at?
President Sandoval, I would tell you that my hopeful answer is that we have PLCs and we have those on a weekly basis, and that they look at data that moves them to closer to this on a weekly basis. We have an entire set of assessment plans where we assess students on probably 4 or 5 times a year on some sort of different type of structure that gives them data that helps them to predict or to get to the point that they can figure out what these scores are going to be long before the test is ever given. We have a process where we use some diagnostic exams that help with their reading level, with their math level. We also have some exams that give us some specific data on grade level standards, and we give those about 3 times a year, benchmark assessments essentially, that the teachers and the principals can look and say, how is the student progressing along the way to get to the place when they take this test in April, that they've looked at some pieces along the way to determine if that student is going to be successful or not be successful. I challenge them every time I talk with them that they should be able to tell me before the test is taken how many kids are going to pass and how many kids are not going to pass, because they've been with them for 8.5 months, and they have 5 different test things that 5 different test data that they should be able to determine yes, they're going to make it, or no, they're not. And so that's kind of our process as we go through the PLC process. We meet with principals once a month about some of the data, and then we give 3 to 5 different types of assessments that help us with gathering data on them from the time they take the test in April to the time they take the test in April. We have 4 or 5 spaces in between there where we get some data.
Gotcha. Perfect. Now, I figured as much, but thank you for that clarification. Further questions, comments, board? Nope. Good. All right. Mr. Moss, thank you. Okay, moving on to our informational reports, 14.1, report on upcoming meetings and events. Ms. Ari.
President Sandoval, members of the board, I do have something to highlight for you this evening. As many of you know, the 20th anniversary of September 11th is fast approaching. We do have a number of schools across our district that are doing some very special things to educate our students about that day and to honor those that lost their lives. As a school district, we will be observing a district-wide moment of silence and asking our community to participate in that along with us. That'll take place on Friday, September 10th, since September 11th is on a Saturday. But did want to make you aware, and we will, of course, get you some additional information on the specifics, so you may join us in that.
Perfect. Thank you for that. All right, moving on to 14.2, legislative, state, and local updates. Ms. Myers.
Thank you, President Sandoval, members of the Governing Board, Dr. Reynolds. I do not have an update this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Myers. 14.3, budget, facilities, planning, and construction report. These subsequent reports are on our website for your viewing at your convenience. Going on to section 15, other business, 15.1, board member opportunity to readdress agenda items. Ms. Hill, any items that you would like to readdress this evening?
No, thank you.
All right, Ms. Underhill?
No, thank you.
Representative Pingrelli? All right, I don't know, thank you. 50.2, request for agenda items for future governing board meetings. Ms. Hill?
None at this time, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Underhill?
No, thank you.
Representative Pingrelli? No, thank you. I don't have any at this point. All right, moving on to 16.1, adjournment. Do you need a motion to adjourn this meeting at 9:18 p.m.?
I move that we adjourn at 9:18 p.m.
I will second.
Ms. Contra, we have a motion by Ms. Underhill and a second by Ms. Hill. Board members, please cast your votes. Motion passes 4 yeas and 1 absent. Board members, thank you very much. Meeting is adjourned. Community, thank you for staying with us over the long haul. I appreciate it. Have a great evening.